Please join me in a pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. First order of business is to approve the agenda. The original published agenda has been amended. There has been an item from the consent agenda that has been removed and brought down to the regular agenda. It is now item number 10, and it is a resolution directing assessments to be levied, pages 184 to 201. That change, please note that. It is now item number 10.
I'd make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Jurdevig. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Olson seconds. Excuse me.
On number 10 with item 2250, do we need to, can we pull that and make that item 10A?
We'll do it when we get to the point, okay? Is that all right?
Okay.
All right.
Sounds good.
And I'll just turn it over to you. Okay, so we have a motion and a second to approve the agenda with the changes noted. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Item number C is the approval of the minutes of February 16, 2021. They have been distributed. They are on pages 3 through 6 and have been posted online.
Make the motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner George seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of February 16th, 2021 as distributed. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. My apologies. I've been in neglect. I should have said Commissioner Simmons is not with us this evening. He's on a planned travel vacation. Item D is the building permits. The building permit report has been distributed. Is there any additions?
I'll make a motion to
comments?
approve.
Any questions? Commissioner George?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you. Commissioner George moves to approve the building permit as presented. Is there a second, please?
Second.
And seconded by Commissioner Olson. It's been moved and seconded to approve the building permit report as distributed. Is there any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Next order of business is the consent agenda. It has been distributed. It is items A through G. Again, making a notation that the consent agenda item with regard to the resolution directing assessments has been moved to the regular agenda. So the consent agenda consists of items A through G.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Jurdevig seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda as presented. Items A through G. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Moving on, we are now into the regular agenda. Item number 1 is a public hearing and first reading of the rezoning on March 1st, 2021 for Westview 5th edition, rezoning from a residential 1SM to mixed 1 and 2 family dwellings to a PUD planned unit development. Mr. Soberg or Mr. Peterson, Mr. Malachi Peterson.
Thank you, Commissioner President. The applicant has submitted an application to replat and rezone lots 20 and 21 of Westview 1st Edition from R-1SM Mixed 1 and 2 Family Dwelling District to PUD Planned Unit Development to allow for the construction of 24 townhome units, 2 single-story office buildings, and a potential church expansion. As part of this application, the applicant has submitted detailed development plans, a preliminary plat, and a site plan with renderings. The Planning and Zoning Commission has approved both the concept plan and detailed development plans for the project with a number of additional requirements, including that the 2 single-story office buildings will be limited to professional uses which meet the permitted uses of the C-OP Commercial Office Park District standards, and that concerns of the adjacent neighborhood be given due consideration with particular attention paid to the screening and buffering of the north side of the development. At the first public hearing for the project in December of last year, a number of neighbors voiced concerns about additional traffic that might come from the development, especially traffic at the intersection of 7th Street East and 40th Avenue South around peak commuting times. Many of these same neighbors have repeated these and other concerns in a formal protest letter sent to the city last week, which is included in your packets. Per City Ordinance 4-432.6, since more than 20% of residents within 150 feet of the proposed development have signed on to the protest letter, the approval of the rezoning shall not become effective except by a favorable vote of 3/4 of all members of the City Commission. This is the first reading of the rezoning, and as such, it is also a public hearing. Representatives of both developers are here tonight, and either they or myself can help to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Questions for Mr. Peterson? Commissioner George, please.
With the extensive amount of concern that the public has brought up, the residents in that area, has anybody done anything to address those concerns with the residents?
So I've been in contact with a couple of them, and a lot have had questions specifically regarding the traffic. So I've talked to our engineering department about the traffic, and the engineering department has indicated to myself that they do not have any concerns with the potential for increased traffic right now. A traffic count from 2018 estimated daily vehicle count on 40th Avenue East as 10,960 vehicles per day, and the engineering department estimates that the arterial can handle about 18,000 cars per day. As for the increased traffic at the intersection of 40th Avenue and 7th Street East, engineering believes this is an issue only during peak travel hours, but both the traffic engineer, I believe, is on tonight, as well as Dustin Scott from the engineering department, in case you have any specific questions that I can answer. And then there has also been some concerns regarding the buffering and landscaping to the north.
I'm glad you brought that up. I was actually wondering about that as well.
Yep. So, as per City Ordinance 4-449A, landscaping standards, the developer will need to choose one of two options to provide a natural buffer between the development and the lower density neighborhood to the north. One option would be doing a 4-foot architectural screen with a 10-foot buffer yard and small evergreen trees, alternating with deciduous trees. And then option 2 would be a 20-foot buffer yard with small evergreen trees alternated with deciduous trees and one row of evergreen or other shrubs. And I believe the neighbors who signed on to the protest letter, within the letter, they've spoke about how I believe they would prefer option number 2, which is the larger yard without the screen.
Okay. Thank you.
So that being said, is that a recommendation then of your department, Mr. Peterson?
So our recommendation is just that the developer would have to follow, pick one of the two options right now. But as part of the approval process, the commission could dictate that one or the other be followed.
Thank you. Commissioner Jurdovic.
That actually addresses my concern.
Additional questions for Mr. Peterson? All right. At this time, we will close the regular agenda and we will move into the public hearing. We are now in a public hearing with regard to the rezoning of Westview 5th Edition R-1SM mixed 1 and 2 family dwellings to PUD planned unit development. Is there anyone that would like to speak to this? If you come to speak to this, I'd ask that you please come to the podium and clearly state your name and address for the record. Welcome. Thank you for coming.
Very quickly, this is a copy of the letter that's somewhere in your packet. I think there's two there.
We've got it in our packet.
Thank you.
Yep.
Oh, yep.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
Yep.
already in the
We-
packet. Yep, thank you though.
Commissioners of West Fargo.
Please state your name and address again, please.
Yep, I am Dale Knutson, property owner of 631 Westview Lane East in West Fargo. And, commissioners, representatives of West Fargo and citizens of West Fargo, good evening. I would like to, reiterate regarding the letter that was just brought up by Malachi. And, so we've got, 11 property owners that have signed onto this letter. There's 31 property owners total. And, so we're the property owners that are within the 150 feet of the development proposed for Westview, 5th edition. And we have, concerns about this proposal that were not adequately addressed by the Planning and Zoning Commission. Listening to Malachi, we believe there's some further consideration being taken here, but we do ask that it is further reviewed for modifications. The almost 3-acre plot of the planned urban development is the current site of Faith Journey Lutheran Church and its community garden and fruit orchard. It is at the uncontrolled T intersection of 40th Avenue South and 7th Street East, across from Cheyenne High School and Liberty Middle School. It's currently zoned R-1SM, mixed 1 and 2 family dwellings. This proposal would make the property a mixed-use district with multiple family dwellings, C-OP commercial activity, and a church, 2 professional office buildings with an unknown number of tenants, 24 rental townhomes, and 61 parking spaces, for a total of 213 spaces would be added. The current church building would be more than doubled in size for unspecified usage. These are our concerns. The traffic. During the school year, traffic at this intersection is already heavy because of school drop-off and pickup, with cars frequently backing up for blocks to make left turns from 7th to 40th and 40th to 7th. This proposal adds daily traffic to off-peak Sunday traffic. The traffic study done in 2018 is inadequate for understanding seasonal and school traffic. Traffic estimates have been based on Sunday church usage and not other uses that might come with a large addition. Traffic by staff and customers of the professional buildings has not been estimated. Since 7th and 40th is a T intersection, it's unclear how a worsening problem can be resolved. The issues of how much traffic can reasonably be added needs to be addressed. Landscaping buffer vegetation, no landscaping plan has been submitted with the detailed PUD proposal, despite being required by City Ordinance 4-432B-B2B3. Given the commercial addition and the daily traffic with noise and lights adjacent to single-family homes, we request that the buffer zone be considered a C-OP zone abutting an R1 zone and therefore required to meet or exceed the buffer yard C. City Ordinance 4-449-A9C9, using vegetation rather than a screen. We also request more information about the aesthetics and durability of the fence that will run north-south on the east side of the townhomes. Lighting and signage, increased outdoor lighting and signage are potential visual nuisances for adjacent properties and the neighborhood. We ask that these be kept to a minimum allowable standards. One additional note that's not on the letter regarding the Westview 4th edition, which is due west of Westview 5th edition. That's already in the plans and has been approved. There are an additional 22 business units in that office park, and that is just off 4th Street and 40th Avenue. So traffic there going either east or west is also going to add to the count on 40th. And with that, that's what I am here to present.
Thank you, Mr. Knutson.
Yes, sir.
Questions, Commissioners, of Mr. Knutson?
If we were to come up with a compromise, where we were requiring a buffer that would be acceptable to you, and then some other parameters, is there a compromise where you think you'd be okay with that? Or are you just completely...
Yeah, I can't answer that without actually seeing what the compromise is.
Okay.
Additional questions, Mr. Knutson? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak to this item? Good evening. Please join us.
Excuse me. Mayor and members of the City Commission, thank you for the public forum. My name is Tony Stukel. I live at 3838 7th Street East, which is borders the north side of the proposed development. And it's along a large community garden and then a fruit orchard planted by the Boy Scouts this last, couple summers ago. And I'm also one of the signers of the letter of protest you received. When we bought our house 3 years ago, we assumed, were assured by the church that they had no intention of making any changes to the property. Well, we understand that, things change and there's no guarantees in life. But we could not anticipate this major change which has been proposed affecting our property and our neighborhood. We are now faced with the prospect of high-density traffic from commercial buildings. The church doubled in size, and the multiple family rental units also. We'll be looking at cars coming and going to several parking lots 7 days a week, rather than kind of the school times and church. Our street, 7th Street East, which carries traffic from middle and high school, also backs up blocks from the 40th every day, and that's getting to be a bit of a problem. And I anticipate it would get worse than what we're seeing coming up here. There's been no estimates of the total traffic that is generated by the proposal, and its impact on the schools and the intersection. We need to feel a traffic study needs to be done to address that. We don't know the details of the buffer zone between our properties and the development. Given the request from an R1 residential zone to multiple family residence and commercial activity, we request the buffer zone of at least 50 feet of vegetation, which I believe is in the statutes somewhere. We hope you'll decide this request needs to be reconsidered and to address our concerns.
Thank you, Mr. Succo. Questions for Mr. Succo? Thank you, sir. This is a public hearing. Excuse me. For Westview, is there anybody else that would like to speak to this issue this evening? Please join us. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Brendan Muldoon. My address is 7621 15th Street South, Fargo.
Could you restate your name, please?
Brendan Muldoon.
Thank you, Brandon. Please continue.
And I'm here on behalf of the prospective land buyer, Mark Buckholz. And unfortunately, he was unable to attend. He had a conflict this evening, but I am stepping in for him. But as far as on the traffic side of things, the plan that's been submitted, Buckholz has really felt like they took into account, rather than looking at either a mixed-use commercial building or higher density multifamily, they chose to go the route of the townhome development, and that was kind of the lowest density that they felt that they could do for it to still be economically feasible. And so they have taken that into considerations, and he also thought it was important to note that 40th Avenue is a collector road, and it allows for a right in and right out off of 40th Avenue, which will take the vast majority of the traffic in and out of that development. That's in addition to what the city engineer said, that the capacity is still quite a ways away from being met. And then as far as on the commercial portion of the lot, or the PUD, which would be more in the southeast corner, they're looking at doing two commercial office buildings, which they deem to be a little bit more of a neighborhood type office, which would likely consist of maybe a law office or an accounting firm or something along that's a little bit more destination based, as opposed to like the high traffic corridors of like Veterans or 32nd Avenue, which would attract more of a retail type base. Another thing that's worthwhile to note is that the church and the office, they kind of draw their traffic at different times. Churches are generally busiest on Sundays, and most of those users in the office will not be operating during that period of time. So, another thing.
Excuse me, sir, Mr. Muldoon. Is there daycare at the church at this time? No? Somebody's shaking their head back. Thank you. Is there, with the expansion, is that planned for daycare? There's been talk of a very large addition to daycare. I'm just talking about, inquisitive about traffic patterns. Mr. Solberg.
Comment, in R1SM district, which they're currently in, church is permitted use by right. A church can create a child care center as a conditionally permitted use.
Thank you.
So in a PUD, as a church, we would include those provisions, so that if there were a child care center in there that operated 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, whatever, it'd be a conditionally permitted use. We'd have to come back to this process.
Thank you, Mr. Solberg. Please continue. I apologize.
Oh, that's all right. So, in terms of, landscaping as far as the buffer, they are very open to that discussion, and they, in general, and their various developments that they've done throughout their history, they want to be respectful, and they're open to that discussion and working with the neighborhood with that regard. I think in the letter, that you guys received from the neighborhood, I think lighting and signage was, brought up as, and so they will be doing a photometric study prior to permitting to be supplied to the city, and due to this consideration, we'll, be taking the design and lighting plan, into account and its effect on the adjacent properties. And so that's something that, that he wanted noted as well. And so, I guess in summary, many developers would make an attempt to further maximize the site, but they have been actively working with the church to enable them to own their property while providing complementary yet appropriate uses within the adjacent area, and least impacting the neighborhoods around it. And so with that, we thank you for the opportunity to take part in this dialogue and be a part of the community.
Thank you, Mr. Muldoon. Questions for Mr. Muldoon? Commissioners?
I guess I would have one.
Mr. Jurdovic?
You commented that you're open to work with the other property owners on the buffering on the north side of the property. I guess from my perspective, I'd like to see the plan. I mean, I'm not sure this gets all the way to being final approved in my mind without something more than we're open to working with them. So.
This evening, I'll remind everybody, this is the first reading, so it is going to come back. We'll have opportunity to do that with the direction that, you know, any of my fellow commissioners have. So, additional questions for Mr. Muldoon? Mr. Olson, Commissioner Olson.
Is the church selling the property to the developer on these other parcels?
Yes, it
how
would.
does this all
And then
work?
there's another church that ultimately will, be coming in to operate the church portion of the building.
But like where the townhomes are going and the office complex, is that gonna be owned by the church, or is that gonna be owned privately?
That's gonna be owned privately.
I have a question, and I know the answer to this, but was there consideration given on the townhomes, their rentals versus ownership? Is that correct?
It's actually a third party that's going to be developing, the townhome portion of it, but I believe that they are going to be built for rental purposes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Muldoon.
Yep.
Additional questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good evening. Is there anyone else that'd like to speak to this item? There's a lady in the back of the room that has tried twice, so we'll invite her up, and then the gentleman over here.
Thank you, Commissioners. I'm Karen Midgarden. I live at 648 38th Avenue East in the Westview 2 Edition. And I am equally affected by the traffic. And I think one thing that hasn't been brought up that probably should be considered, the playing fields for softball and baseball, the parking is along our little 7th Street. Right now, when there's a game, I mean, obviously we didn't have a game last year, but in the previous years, it's difficult to get down that street if there's a game. If we have additional traffic, I don't think the poor people that are facing that will be able to get out of their driveways. It's not a very big street, and so I would just ask that you consider working with this school. I'm not sure, but the parking is going to be a real detriment during the seasons when those west playing fields are in use. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. This gentleman here had his hand up next. If you'd like to speak to this issue.
Good evening. My name is Riley Rude. I am the owner of the townhome portion and general contractor on that site. So I just echo what, we partner with the Buckholes Group. So I just echo Mark's statements, but we've done, or I've built similar projects in Moorhead and downtown Fargo as well. We look to be a good neighbor. I hold these and for rent, make a living this way. So I take great pride in a good product. The tenants have my direct line, so I am the first to respond if there's any issues. So, these are a higher end product. These are by no means cheap to build. If anyone's interested in seeing, the neighbors as far as what their neighbors will look like, we have 16 built currently, 30th Avenue and 30th Street in Moorhead. I think they've turned out great. So I don't anticipate any issues from, who will live there or any stigmas attached to them being rental properties. That's not a concern of mine. But understandably so, the neighbors. As far as the buffers go, we build these with landscape. A landscape plan has to be submitted, upon permitting. So that's, to this point, we haven't submitted a full plan because beyond noting that the buffer is required on the site plan, that's the stage we're at. But just in the normal course of development and landscaping, what we've done elsewhere has been curbing trees, rock, bushes, plants. We'll certainly meet or probably exceed, but I'm not at that point as far as where the plant units are at and what we need, or fencing, if that is the option that is chosen. So I just wanted to echo, those are the statements, put a face to a name. Excited about the project and working with, we have been working for quite a while, many months on this. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rude. Is there questions for Mr. Rude from the commission? Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else that would like to speak to this item? Please, the lady in the back.
Thank you very much, Commissioners. My name is Myra Kosak, and I live at 3760 7th Street East. I do not live, I live quite a ways from the church, well over a block away, but I am directly across the street from the ball fields of the middle school. During school, when school is, first of all, the best thing that's happened in my life is the pandemic, because I can get in and out of my driveway in the morning when school is in session. Now that school is back full-time, all the students are in, you cannot get in and out of my driveway during that time, before and after school when the buses are coming down. As Ms. Midgarten had said, when the softball fields are in use, the traffic is extremely horrible. And that's, again, a problem getting in and out of driveways. So it's not only the people that are up in Westview, Townhome 1 Association, it's also the people in Townhome 2 that are affected by this because of the traffic. I just see if another school comes in over at the church, it's going to be impossible to use that street during school hours for the residents. And that's my main concern.
Thank you, ma'am. Questions from the commissioners? Please, Commissioner Jurdovic.
Just one quick clarification. You said it's really hard to get, off your driveway onto the street. Is that because of the on-street parking?
During the week when school is in session, it's because of the buses and parents coming to take their kids to school. Nobody wants to let you out of your driveway.
So there's, at a drive, at a school starting and ending,
Yes.
that times of the day is difficult for you?
Extremely, yes. So I think a traffic study that was done in 2018, is not sufficient to determine this on. I think a new one needs to be done. It's now 2021. You've got more, houses that have built and more neighbors that have moved in, and you're talking about adding to it.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay?
Anyone else?
Thank you.
Thank you. Again, this is a public hearing on the Westview, item on the agenda. Fifth edition. Is there anybody else that would like to speak to this item?
Commission President Dardis, we have one individual online who has raised their hand to speak.
Thank you. Would you provide them access, please? Ask them to state their name and address, please.
My
Go
name
ahead.
is Jeff Watney. I am a resident of West Fargo, 807 10th Avenue East. I am the current president of Faith Lutheran Church. That property is currently our property, and we are in the process of selling it to Burning Hearts Lutheran Church. So it is not Faith Lutheran that is looking to do anything with the extra land, but it is the potential buyer that's looking at doing this, and we sure want to work, if there's any part we play, to work with the residents. We would sure do that from our church's standpoint. I just wanted to make sure that the commission knew that it was, well, what the situation was with the sale of the church.
Thank you, Mr. Watney. Are there any questions of Mr. Watney? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak to this item? Westview 5th edition. Mr. Scott, could I ask you to step to the podium, please? Thank you. This gentleman is Mr. Dustin Scott, our city engineer. Some of the discussion that's taken place with regard to traffic, Mr. Scott. Now, I understand that, you know, they've been doing COVID testing at the church, and when school went back in session, that did create some problems. I have been on site a number of times and witnessed it myself. So, would you share with us your thoughts on their concerns with regard to having another traffic study and those types of things, please?
Absolutely. Good evening, Commission President Dardis, members of the Commission, and all those attending tonight. Certainly, I've not been the engineer intimately involved with this. Our transportation engineer, Andrew Ruckey, has been reviewing and providing comments. I do want to clarify that I don't believe there was a specific study done in the area in 2018. I think the reference that our transportation engineer gave was in relation to traffic counts that were conducted in 2018. So the last time we had a traffic count on 40th Avenue, those are the numbers that we're using to base on the effects to 40th Avenue. I don't believe he's evaluated the specific impacts to 7th Avenue, which is more of a local roadway. It is a bit of a pseudo-collector, but 4th, I did pull up an image here, 4th Street is the collector roadway. 7th, again, is considered more of a local, albeit it does have a designated parking lane and does function as, again, that pseudo-collector, in that it does support a lot of the transportation needs in the morning for the school district. I do want to point out that the sites here, the townhome site is disconnected from the church site. The townhome site will have a right in, right out on the 40th. There will be some cross-connectivity through this Westview 4th edition, which has a driveway onto 4th Street. So I don't see any concerns out of there. I believe there's 20 to 25 units going in there at about 10 trips a day per unit. That's 250 units, or 250 trips coming out of this particular development onto 40th. And some of that might even migrate over to 4th Street instead of coming out onto 40th. So certainly not much of a traffic impact on the 40th with that development. As far as the proposed use of the church facility expansion, you know, again, there is a right-in, right-out on the 40th. It's difficult to see in this particular map, but the driveway that is existing there is a median on 40th, so that is right-in, right-out. I believe, from what I'm listening to tonight, that a majority of the concern is the increased traffic on 7th Street. And I don't, again, have any intimate knowledge of what those impacts are in terms of citing any transportation-type data, traffic data. I'm not opposed to requiring an additional traffic study done to understand what those impacts are. But I would say that, you know, given that there's a right-in, right-out on the 40th, my concern to the impact of 40th is minimal. I guess I'm not 100% sure what the impacts we'll find on 7th Street are, especially with the peak of the school district operations. So when they are taking the buses to 7th, routing them back up to the north, I understand that is very congested for that 15 to 30 minute duration. Yes, if there are vehicles trying to leave or enter this site, that only adds to it. But
excuse me, Mr. Scott. Commissioner George has a question.
Yeah, you brought up a point that I was thinking about, because the townhome portion to me doesn't seem like an issue. So I'm wondering, can we break these up? Can we vote on them separate and have the townhome item be one vote and then the church and the offices be another vote? And say put a condition on the church and the offices that it has to have a traffic study and the buffer, you know, more specifics laid out in the items? Or
With respect, this is a first reading. And so I think that we will have plenty of input to visit with staff about concerns. Am I correct, Mr. Soberg, with regard to some of the particulars?
Sorry to interrupt Dustin there. The proposals for a planned unit development, we need a certain size for those, a planned unit development, and they meet that as part of the package. You can place conditions within the PUD specific to certain portions of the development, but to separately vote on them, I'd say the answer is probably no. One point I also want to make is, as it currently sits today as an R1SM district, we've modeled certain things within our 40th Avenue traffic studies to determine increased density. As this is a vacant lot, it will develop someday. It can develop to a certain extent today. The density that they're proposing in the townhome units could be met in its current form. They're proposing a different type of structure in those townhomes, which we wouldn't be able to permit in the R1SM district. But if they broke it up into 2-unit structures, they could get that permitted today. Additionally, the church could expand to however they could expand through our civil engineering requirements on the site and through permitting, through zoning and building. So they could expand greatly. I think the biggest question here is the commercial site on the southeast corner, and then the building type of the townhomes. The church itself, we really don't have much say. So that impact of traffic would be something we would maybe deal with at time of permitting, not through this process of entitlement that they're going through right now. So kind of a long answer to your question. I'd just say that quick answer is no, let's keep it all together. But pick out those pieces that you have an issue. Stay away from the church side, though. We don't want to limit a church's ability to expand legally. It's not something we want to touch. So,
thank you, Mr. Soberg. Is there anyone here from Burning Hearts Church this evening? Okay. All right, very good.
I would have one more question for Dustin, actually.
Please, Commissioner Jurdevig.
Dustin, on the current drawings, it shows 2 different driveways that would come out onto 7th. Considering that 7th seems to be one of the challenging streets, I mean, you know, could that be eliminated down to 1, and would that drive more traffic to, you know, exit that parking lot to 40th, I guess? I mean, I realize I'm just asking for your opinion, but...
Well, thank you, Commissioner Jurdevig. I believe that's a possibility. I'm going to get to the map. I'm a visual guy, so I'm going to scroll to the map here and just make sure I follow what you're asking.
The page I'm looking at is page 36, I believe.
Is this it?
Well, I'm looking at a different one, but I'm assuming that's just a...
They're the same.
But from what I can see, there's 2 driveways that would exit and enter the parking lot here from Seventh Street. I'm just wondering if that were restricted to one, would that drive less traffic onto Seventh, where it seems like we have a parking issue at times of certain sporting events and buses and so forth?
Yeah, it certainly helps reduce the conflict points, and it will alleviate some congestion. Certainly a great point to bring up. There is an existing driveway there.
Right, yeah.
But we
I realize there's one there today, but the drawing shows two in the future.
And that second one, there's an approach that was installed, I believe, when we paved 7th Street, so, you know, that approach would have to be removed. Certainly something that we can require with the permitting phase, or if it needs to be a condition of approving, certainly could do that too. And again, I'm not overly opposed to requiring a traffic study done. That would be something that would be at the expense of the developer, that we would want to certainly review and approve. Just again, to provide that data to the residents.
What would be a normal timeline to conduct one of those, Dustin?
It would be really up to the consulting world. We generally resource one consultant with these types of traffic studies that would be the quickest route, but we would have to really engage them as to, you know, are they available? Do they have the capacity? If they were available to start it next week, it would take them probably a week's worth of time to generate a report, but we would have to start that process, execute an agreement, come before the commission to ask to spend money on the consult, you know, all that good stuff. Or again, we force the developer to pay for it, and then the only reluctance there is now you're asking the developer to hire someone to prove to us that it's okay, and I feel that's our job too.
I mean, as far as the traffic study goes, what's this gonna show us? What is it gonna show us that we don't already know? The residents are already telling us it's a problem.
That's a good point, Commissioner George. I can tell you that I met with the school district about a month ago with concerns of traffic in this area. Their concern is a little further east, and with their intersection on 38th and Veterans Boulevard, but they did tell me that when the buses are trying to leave the high school and head west and get onto 7th Street to go north up to the Liberty Middle School, that is certainly a challenging 15 to 30 minutes every day.
My son lives on the very north end of 7th, and when we travel to go visit, if it's during the day, it is challenging. These people are spot on.
I like Eric's point of maybe you get rid of that driveway on 7th altogether and just, so 40th is the only way they can enter and exit, then you're not increasing the traffic.
All right, thank you, Mr. Scott. Is there anyone else that would like to speak to this? We're still in our public hearing portion of the meeting. The lady in the back, we'll give you one more chance.
Thank you. I hadn't planned to say anything, but I feel if you are considering a traffic study next week, I know he was being just speculating, but next week would not be a good time. You need one at the height of the spring season when the baseball team is practicing, the soccer teams are out there, the kids who are in softball. That's when we get, because there's parents that park all the way up and down. It isn't just for a little while, it's for the hours of the game. And so I feel if there's going to be an accurate traffic study, you need to have that, plus the buses coming and going because they play in the afternoons in the spring. So that's when it really gets full. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else that hasn't spoke to this issue would like to speak? Briefly, please, Mr. Muldoon.
Sure. I was just going to say, there was a representative that was trying to get in via the online, but he just sent me an email that he wasn't able to get the link to work. His name is Rhett Fiskness.
I know him, yeah.
So at any rate, I just wanted to pass that on.
Thank you, sir.
Yep.
You don't show that?
No, but we have others on the meeting who were able to get in.
Are they requesting to speak?
No.
All right. I close the public hearing. We go back to the regular agenda for discussion on the first reading of the rezoning of Westview 5th Edition from R-1SM to mixed 1-2-family dwelling to a PUD planned unit development. Commissioners, any additional questions of Mr. Peterson? Do you have anything else for us at this time, Mr. Peterson?
Not at this time, no.
Okay. Commissioners, your thoughts?
I would be open to moving it forward with the conditions.
With the conditions listed by staff or additional?
The conditions of the buffer. I think we need to eliminate that driveway on 7th. What do you guys think about that?
I would, yeah, I feel good moving it forward as long as what comes back in front of us is something that gives us more detail about the buffer and addresses, if possible, the 7th Street issue. I mean, we all know 40th is going to be busy. My concern is actually more on 7th.
Same.
Mr. Jurdevig's comment was on the proposed plan where there's two approaches. Am I misunderstanding you, Commissioner George?
Right, we're on the same page where...
The second one.
This 7th, which is already there, is the problem. 40th, which is made for heavier traffic, would be more appropriate to keep the traffic on.
Okay, so, understanding, I think I have staff that wants to get to the microphone. Mr. Scott?
Yes, I'm gonna pull up the map again, just to make sure we're all on the same page. Again, I'm a visual person, so I'm gonna have to scroll down to that page again. Was it 36, Commissioner Jurdevig?
Yes, that's the one that I was looking at.
Yeah, there's a couple. I think 31 has it too.
So there's an existing one that is right here today, and that is shown in this aerial. Zoom in. So this existing one is here. There is another approach that is installed today, and I believe what Commissioner Jurdevig was indicating was that not to allow this second proposed access to go in, so that there would only be the one drive aisle that's there today, along with the drive aisle that's down to 40th today.
Do you have to have two, or can you get rid of both of them on 7th?
For circulation purposes, it's certainly better for the site to have that mobility. You know, if a traffic study were to be done, they're going to look at what is the increased number of trips coming out of this site, and they are going to divide it up into 7th and 40th, and at the end of the day, based on how wide 7th is, you know, it's fully 2 lanes, and there is a parking lane there, but it's a fully 2-lane roadway that it's not going to show a breakdown of our main roadway network.
Although on the other hand, that shouldn't really even affect the residents there because they're not going that far.
When the commercial buildings come in there's going to be times when during school times when the buses and all, the public's going to come out of there and they're going to go north. They're going to try and go north rather than fight the traffic on. That would be my assumption. That's what I've witnessed.
Right, and that's where the concern gets to be is there's already, for that 15 to 30 minutes in the morning, and I'm not sure what it's like in the afternoon, but I know for sure in the morning it's pretty congested out here, and so things like trying to leave this residence, it's difficult to do in that time frame. But a traffic study is going to look at, our concerns are going to be with our primary arterial roadways. We're going to look at what are the impacts to 40th. Is 7th Street breaking down? Is there a queue or a backup such that cars start stacking into 40th and then has a domino effect rippling into the intersection at Veterans? We're going to look at that type of an impact. We're not going to look at whether or not for 10 minutes there's a stack of cars here. I mean, it certainly, in fact, that's where I think, like Commissioner President Darda said, that we already know that that's a problem. Mm-hmm. But this roadway is designed, I guess, it's to be expected. 7th Avenue out here, for example, gets busy enough to where there's a period of time that residents can't leave their homes. So again, a traffic study is going to be concerned with what are the impacts gonna occur on the 40th? Or is it gonna have a domino effect and impact Veterans Boulevard? Is there enough circulation? Can, you know, are cars able to eventually get north? And again, it might be some inconvenience there with that increased traffic, but I'm guessing that a traffic study is probably not gonna show that having this intersection here is gonna be, call it an adverse impact to our street system, our overall roadway network. Again, we already know that there is an impact to the residents that live along 7th in the morning. We already know that, so.
Is there, the parking, are there any restrictions on 7th? Can you park on both sides of the street?
No, there's the parking lane on the east side of the road.
Yeah, okay. Just wanted to clarify that for the public.
The only thing I could just throw in here would be to alleviate what we have right now, even without any further development, would be to maybe put in a sign right there at that T intersection that there's no right turns or no left turns at certain times of the day. You're coming out, you're heading southbound on 7th Street, you gotta take a right. You can't sit there and take a left. You gotta take a right and get out of there. That would increase the flow to get out of that neighborhood, and the problem would be minimized, I see. That'd be something to consider.
I mean, I think the 7th Avenue traffic is a conversation that we should be having with the school.
Right.
I mean, everybody I heard that talked about 7th Avenue talked about either buses or parking during, I forget if it was soccer or baseball or whatever it might be. To me, there's a conversation that the city needs to be having with the school about that, those aspects, and that is separate, in my opinion, from this. I do like the idea of getting it down to one approach versus two, because I do think that'll push less traffic onto 7th and more to 40th. Do we have a motion?
We don't.
Didn't make an official one.
She didn't finish it.
Okay.
We had questions on the recommendations.
Okay, so I will make a motion to approve the first reading upon the conditions that we have a plan for a buffer. And do we want to include anything else on that?
Well, there's some already listed in here.
Yeah.
I would say the other recommendations that were in the packet.
Okay.
Here, thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Olson. Been moved and seconded to approve the first reading of the Westview 5th Edition rezoning from R-1 SM mixed 1 and 2 family dwellings to a PUD. Is there any further discussion? Mr. Muldoon, I would recommend highly that you visit with staff when it comes to planning and zoning on the buffers and things like that, before we bring it back to this next reading. It just to help your cause, if you will. We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Moving on in the regular agenda, item number 2 is a public hearing in the first reading of the zoning ordinance text amendment on, zoning the ordinance amendment to the agricultural district standards. Mr. Sobert.
Thank you, Mr. President, Commissioners. If you recall, Black Powder Fireworks was here this past year about adding or moving their location because of the Diversion Authority's purchase of their property. Rather than rezone a piece of property to light industrial, which would have provided for their ability to expand, we looked at adding a text amendment to the agricultural district standards to include as a conditionally permitted use seasonal sale of retail goods. We did not bring that public hearing and first reading to you because we were waiting until they picked their right site. They picked their right site. We've continued along with them as they plat the property and continue that. So tonight we're simply asking for the first reading and public hearing of the text amendment to provide for seasonal sale of retail goods as a conditionally permitted use within the agricultural district. I stand for any questions, and Kevin Brennan is here to represent the applicant.
Thank you, Mr. Sobert.
Thank you.
Commissioners, questions of Mr. Sobert? All right, hearing none. We close the regular agenda, and we move into the public hearing. Is there anyone who would like to speak to the public hearing about the amendment for zoning ordinance changes on the agricultural district standards? Is there anyone that would like to speak to the zoning ordinance text amendment with regard to the agricultural district standards? Is there anyone that would like to speak with regard to the zoning text amendment to the agricultural district standards? Hearing none. Well, sir, please come forward.
Is this just in regards to the conditional use, this moment?
Yeah, this is just to add the ability to do that as a conditional use, first reading, public hearing, so really not a lot of discussion about the specifics.
Sorry, sir.
All right, no problem. Hearing none, I close the public hearing. We go back to the regular agenda. Commissioners, any additional questions of Mr. Solberg? Are you ready to act on this?
All this is doing is adding that item number 9 that just simply states seasonal sale of retail goods.
Yes, sir. And this is in our extraterritorial.
Anywhere it's zoned agricultural.
Oh, okay. Thank you for that clarification.
I'll move on first reading.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Mr. Jurdevig seconds. Been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Is there any discussion on the first reading for the zoning ordinance text amendment change to the agricultural district standards? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Item number 3 is a conditional use permit for off-premise signage at 2920 Cheyenne Street, Northern Lights property. Mr. Solberg.
Thank you again, Mr. President, Commissioners. We received this application to accommodate the construction of a 315 square foot video board affixed to a building at Lot 1, Block 1, Eagle Run Plaza, 6th edition. This is a sign on the Northern Lights project, which is just north of the lights and within the entertainment mixed-use district. The largest wall sign allowed for the building would be 100 square feet. That is an on-premise sign. The applicant is applying to have the sign considered as an off-premise sign to advertise both the commercial, what our application said at the time, both the commercial tenants, and as a sign to promote sponsors and events taking place in the district. Off-premise signs in the entertainment mixed-use district may be approved as a conditional use. The statement within there says that the signage within the district should take into account the characteristics of its surrounding area and the intent and context of a vibrant entertainment environment. Commission should deliberate such items as size, intensity of light or color, and motion to avoid nuisance factors to the public and neighboring uses. Off-premise signs considered as a conditional use are limited in size up to 750 square feet, unless otherwise approved through the conditional use process. The large off-premise sign at the lights, which is at the corner of 32nd and Cheyenne Street, was approved based on the context and scale of its placement. As you recall, that was considered up against the properties which it was adjacent to, larger structures. It was placed in front of that. That one's 900 square feet. The definition of an off-premise sign within the city's sign code is as follows: an advertising sign not related to the premises on which it is located. So the corner light sign, there's an agreement between the city and West Fargo Events and Epic Events on that, on what they advertise on there, but from the city's planning department's perspective, all we can regulate on there is whether or not it's off-premise. So you can't advertise for something that's on-premise on that sign. You can only advertise what's off-premise in order to meet city zoning ordinances. Regarding the criteria we use to consider a conditional use, staff has noted that the commission should consider scale of the sign and lighting to the adjacent properties. Regarding consistency with city plans and ordinances, staff is of the opinion that the sign does not appear to be consistent with the intent of the entertainment mixed-use district and is merely a larger wall sign than what we would normally allow. At their February 9th, 2021 regular meeting, the Planning Commission held a public hearing and reviewed the application, concurring with staff to hereby recommend denial of the application on the basis that it is not consistent with city plans and ordinances. This being a conditional use, the City Commission is not required to hold a public hearing. We've not had any comments from the public. However, the applicant is here and available to answer any questions. Mr. Ian and Mr. Jim Bullis are representing Eagle Ridge on this, so I will leave it to the Commissioner President, if you wish to hear from them.
Question for you. It's on the Northern Lights building. Does Eagle Ridge own the building?
Let me see the owner.
So, we have representatives from Eagle Ridge here to speak on the Northern Lights facility?
Eagle Ridge Partners is the applicant. Northern Lights on Cheyenne LLC is the owner.
2 weeks ago, the applicant was the Northern Lights. The original application came in from Northern Lights. Now the application is by Eagle Ridge.
I can verify that for you, Commissioner President. I have the application in front of me. Sorry, I'm trying to find the application itself. I'm not finding it, but our staff report, which you have before you, we always check when we fill out that staff report, and the applicant and the owner are not always the same. So the owner, which we state in our staff report, is Northern Lights on Cheyenne LLC, which we have in the application, and the applicant is Eagle Ridge Partners LLC.
The original?
I just handed it from the applicant. I can't find the original in my packet here. I'll look for it as I sit down.
So, to my understanding then, the Northern Lights cannot advertise on this sign if we put this up as an off-premise sign. Is that correct?
If I'm reviewing it and enforcing the ordinance, I would say any tenant within the building wouldn't be able to advertise on the sign.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner George, you had a question?
Yeah, just real quick. I'm assuming that at night, the brightness would be dimmed down in this one as well, so that it wouldn't be an issue for traffic?
That's what I would recommend. I'd have to look at specifics of the conditional use permit that we provided, or that we used for the Lights property. We had a certain lumens that we used. I'm not an expert on lumens. The off-premise sign that was provided by them was by somebody who does quite a bit of that, so if approved, I would like that we got a little bit more time, not to have a final approval tonight, but make a recommendation that we look at that and give us maybe time to come back to you. Right now, I don't have an alternative recommendation for you for approval. My only recommendation is for denial. So if you do choose to move on approving it tonight, I'd ask maybe a little bit of time to do a little bit more research on that.
The national manufacturers of this type of product will always have it so they meet the lumen standards of the cities across America. The lumens go up during the daytime to fight the sunlight, the ambient light, and they dim down at the evening. So I don't think that'd be, and you know, dependent upon which product this is, if it's Timatic or Daktronics, they can send their field engineers up here and they can run those tests, and they always pass.
The most difficult...
I've conducted many of them.
Mr. President, the most difficult thing for us would be to have a number that we could use to then enforce. Otherwise, I'm
Sure.
I don't have anything to base it upon, so.
Okay. Any additional questions from Mr. Sober?
So just to
Commissioner Olson.
be clear, they're proposing an off-premise sign that's actually affixed to a building, which would really be an on-premise sign, right? They want to have it attached to a building, but advertise for things that are not in the building.
I think that's where Commissioner President and Commissioner Olson, I think that's where the applicant might want to speak to this. The original application, from staff's perspective, was they were going to do both on and off-premise signage. Where it's at, we don't regulate that in our current sign code. A lot of sign codes do. So a lot of sign codes might say, if it's an off-premise sign, you can't affix it to the building. Our current sign code does not state that.
Okay.
But looks and smells and feels like a sign that's on-premise is sort of what we talked about at the Planning Commission. It really looks and smells and feels like an on-premise sign, so that's where we were going from, so.
Do the commissioners have any additional questions? Do any of the commissioners wish to speak to the applicant? Okay. What's your pleasure?
Personally, I'm fine with it, so as long as the lumens are within, you know, what you want. So I guess I would make a motion to approve it with that condition.
With the conditions that staff can do additional review, is that it?
Yes.
Is that what you're asking for, Mr. Solberg?
If you're voting to approve it, you're voting to approve the size, and we would be given the opportunity to come back to the commission with some sort of a lumens that would be acceptable.
Keeping in mind, an on-premise sign located on their facility, the square footage is 100 square feet. This is 315 square feet.
So a comparable sized one would be similar to what's currently on the VFW building? Is that about the size of what's permitted? Nope.
No,
Trying to get
we
it-
don't allow something this large on, as an on-premise sign. So to compare this in size, and I don't want to say the specific number, but the sign at the corner of Main Avenue and 45th Street in West Fargo is around 300 to 350 square feet.
Well, I misstated that. The sign that would be within our ordinance is similar to the size that's on
Yeah,
where
100.
VFW is.
Yeah, the sign on Boulevard Square, for instance, it's that one that goes up and down, video board, that's 100 square feet.
Okay.
They met the max on that one.
Is it like pictured? Is that what they're planning on doing? Just between the windows like that, straight up? Is
Yes.
that like exactly what they're planning?
Yeah.
'Cause, I mean, I drove by there this morning and I thought about it and I'm like, I think it's okay. So, that's just my opinion.
And if I could, and I know there's a motion on the table, Mr. President,
Fine.
my basis in our recommendation is all based on code. And so, your discretion is what you're given the opportunity to review in a conditional use permit. And my only concern on this is that, again, it's on the wall. It's not what a typical billboard might look like. So I just wanted some clarity from the applicant on that, whether or not they're understanding that this would then only be off-premise. Because if we allow any on-premise on here, now we lose all integrity of our ordinance that only allows people to have a 100 square foot sign on their building, just because it's off-premise.
If the ownership wants to speak, they're welcome to come to the podium. Mr. Bullis.
Thank you, Mr. President and Commissioners. Again, my name is Jim Bullis. I'm here on behalf of the applicant. The original applicant was actually Eagle Ridge Partners. I've got a little different thought in my mind what I wanted to use this sign for. We wanted to use it for our other Eagle Ridge ventures. It's just a great location. It's on the go-home side of the road, and that band of our building is very visible. So while it's on one of our buildings, it's owned by an affiliated entity. Our plan is to use this for off-premises use. And I presume that the city's got some way of enforcing that if we break the rules, but that's not what we intend to do.
Do you
We just think it's a
understand
great-
if it's off-premise, you can't advertise on-premise entities, your commercial space on the bottom as well as rental information?
No, we're completely aware of that, and we've reserved enough signage in our signage plan so that any of the commercial tenants have space still under our on-premises signage plan. And we would never go to the expense of something like this for an apartment building. I mean, we've got $100 million in properties in West Fargo now, and we've never done something like this for a premises. So that really is our intent. I think mounting it to the building is what's confusing people. It's just that in that spot, there's so many underground utilities. If we were to try and put a pole there, I think that building we already encroach on your right-of-way, on that little corner of the building, so this makes more sense, frankly, for everybody. And I'll try and answer any other questions you may have.
Questions, please. Commissioner Olson first, then Commissioner George.
Are there actually gonna be apartments on either side of those?
Yeah,
The proposed sign?
For sure. In fact,
Would you live there, if the sign was there blaring, beaming out at night? Would you live there? I'm curious. If you would put up with a sign like that as it's going off and on all night long?
I don't know that our intent is to, I mean, this thing's gonna be dimmed down. I'm not gonna live there anyways, with or without it.
But if you would.
I'm not trying to, I'm just saying that, you know, and no one's gonna be forced to live there.
No.
And, you know, we did check with the other builders, Mr. Jordan across the street made sure he had no objections on this, and he was just bending our arm for advertising. That was about the extent of that conversation, but.
Commissioner George.
So, what is your motivation? Is it you make money off of advertising sales then with this? Is that your motivation to have it?
Our motivation is to have this so we don't have to pay others for advertising. And we've got other ventures that we use. We have commercial tenants in all sorts of our buildings, including businesses we own. And we look at it as, hey, this is a great location. You know, we're putting one of these on Veterans in our second office building we're building there. Our software can run both of them at the same time. So it's really no more effort to put it in two good locations than one. That's why we're looking at it, and that way we don't have to go by advertising.
Okay, so then just to be clear with the ordinance, then they could advertise for their other locations on this spot, just not that, just not on-premise businesses. Is that for the ordinance, or am I confused on that?
No, if it's Mr. Solberg answered the question. Off-premise signage, then they can advertise, off-premise signage, they can advertise any entity.
Anything.
So he can advertise anybody that he does insurance business with, anybody, anything is open. If it's an off-premise sign,
Okay.
you can advertise any and all entities that you can sell it to.
Okay.
So, Mr. Solberg? Got it? Got it? Okay. I've got 44 years of experience in the sign industry, so forgive me if I'm being, dropping a few, facts around here, so my apologies.
Any other questions or?
Anybody else? Questions? Again, we have a motion and a second. And
I don't think we have a second.
we do not have a second. You're right, I don't have a second. Is there a second to Commissioner George's motion? Is there a second? Motion fails on the lack of a second. Commissioners, it's your pleasure.
I made the original motion, so somebody else gets to go.
I'll make the motion.
I'm assuming they're contemplating, so I'm gonna give them time.
I'll make the motion based on the recommendation of the city staff to deny the application because it's not consistent with our plans and ordinances.
Is there a second?
Yeah, I'll second that.
Commissioner Jurdevig seconds. Been moved and seconded to deny, based on the recommendations of staff, for the conditional use permit for an off-premise sign at 2920 Cheyenne Street. Is there any further discussion? Is there any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries on a 3-to-1 vote. Moving on. Item number 4. Agenda item from a prior commission meeting on February 16th of 2021, the approval of a 5-year remodel exemption. All Seasons Motorsports has added an addition which has added over $45,000 in property value. They have met the application criteria and the minimum value threshold. They are eligible for a 5-year exemption, 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024, and 2025. Mrs. Fisk.
Yes, thank you, Commission President Dardis and Commissioners. I am not Nick Lee, but I told Nick that I would come up here and give you the history that you had asked for at the last meeting. And I know it's in your packet, it's a lot of information, but you were wondering when this was adopted and how it works. Back in October of 1999, the City Commission adopted the commercial tax incentive for new and expanding businesses, and they were required to pay a minimum of have a minimum of $50,000 of investment in order to qualify for this 5-year exemption. From that point, they did some changes again. Let me get back to where I was. In 2000, well, I'll just cut right to it. In 2013, the requirement was changed from $50,000 to $45,000. So right now, we're sitting with a policy that's been approved by commission for 5 years with the minimum, with the maximum necessary to expand to get the 5-year exemption, $45,000. In talking with our assessor, Mr. Lee, he said in the last 5 years, he's had, I believe, 6 of these applications? Seven applications, so it's not a heavily utilized item, but it is out there. I just wanted to express this with you, as this is a policy that was adopted by commission. If it's something that you're not happy with, my request would be that you direct staff to work on a policy amendment based on what you'd like going forward. But my recommendation would be for those that have applied under the current policy, that they've met all the requirements based on the policy that was approved by commission.
Thank you, Mrs. Fisk. Any questions?
I have one question.
Commissioner Olson, please.
Is it, an automatic, I mean, is it all or nothing for 5 years, or is that what they're requesting? Is it for 5 years, or is it, is it 1, 2, anywhere between 1 and 5, or is it always an automatic 5?
The policy approved by commission by resolution was 5 years for any value increase for the remodeling or new building. So whatever their value was stays, but any increase in value is off for 5 years. I don't believe that allows for anything else, because there was nothing else written in the verbiage allowing for a reduction or anything like that. Is there, Nick, do you want to?
Mr. Nick Lee, City Assessor for the City of West Fargo.
Evening, Commissioners. No, for commercial, it's just 5 years, so it's 5 or nothing. There was a lower 3-year for residential, which this is also a residential thing. And between both of them, we've had 7. There's been 5 commercial and 2 residential in the 6 years I've been here. So it's not heavily used. But currently our process is they get a hold of us before we do an inspection. They do the project, we do an inspection. Then once we know that they've met all the criteria and they followed our process, then we bring it to commission, and we've always put it on the consent agenda for the last 6 years. So if that's something you want us to put on the regular agenda, I will not be handling the commercial ones. Matt Marshall was doing that. We picked up the slack. Lauren will be doing them going forward. So though this doesn't really affect me on the commercial ones, we will bring the residential ones, potentially could go to planning as well, as we are not an advocate for or against exemptions. But if you have any other questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Commissioner George.
I guess I have more of an opinion. So I actually support this because I would rather see a tax exemption go towards a remodel, to keep older buildings revitalized, and an incentive to keep, people in the older buildings and keep them nice versus new construction. I would rather support that than, the new property tax incentives. So I do think there is room for improvement on what we have, so I'd be open to revitalizing or, renewing the whole thing. But these people were told, this is our, guidelines. So I would personally support approving these, but be open to changing the policy going forward.
Thank you, Commissioner George. Anybody else?
Yeah, I mean, just a few comments. I think there's a lot of room for improvement. I don't understand the uncapped nature of a 5-year tax exemption on not just remodeling an existing building, but they could add a multi-million-dollar addition onto it and in theory not pay a penny of tax. I mean, we're just by default, to me that falls into more of an incentive category, and I think we shouldn't just rubber stamp that as just a program. I think that should be a discussion. So I am opposed to how this is currently written. I'll also say that as residents, I mean, we approve building permit reports all the time that show remodel projects of homeowners that are in excess of $25,000. So, the fact that I can only remember one other time as a commissioner besides these two that I remember seeing one, there's some information out there that I guess our residents should be made aware of, because they're not taking advantage of what's there, even though I disagree with the 5-year exemption of it, so.
Thank you, Commissioner Jurdevig. Anybody else? Thank you, Mr. Lee. You're right. I think there's
more than one tonight.
There's 5 or 6 of them on the list tonight that are all in the 60,000 plus remodel. So, that being said.
I would have a question, I guess, for John.
Mr. Shockley.
So, this has been I forget the word, the guidelines that have been used by the City Commission for 20 years. Is the recommendation to approve it because of that? It's weird that we would have guidelines that we could vote against.
Well, so the commission can, great question, the commission can change the rules if it wants to. My advice would be, since the applicant applied under the old guidelines, that you would approve it, and if there's a desire to change the guidelines, along with your motion approving it, you would put a moratorium on any new applications until the commission had a chance to develop and adopt new guidelines, if that was the desire of the commission.
Thank you, Mr. Shockley.
I'd be good with that, and that would be for this one and the next one then.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you, Commissioner.
Oh, yeah, I would be good with what Mr. Shockley said, and that would be true for, I guess, item 4 and 5 then.
Okay. I would agree with Mrs. Fisk and Mr. Shockley's assessment that if they applied under the existing policy, that I'm the one that asked for all this additional information, because honestly, this commission had not been presented this, and we're unaware of the policy. And so that's why they were having the discussion this evening. It's no reflection on these individual businesses that have applied to that. That's not what this is about. Again, this is one of those ordinance that was buried deep in the 3-ring binder that's about this big, thanks to Mr. Shockley and his efforts. And thus, so, with that said, what is your pleasure on item number 4?
I will begrudgingly make a motion to approve the exemption for all-season motorsports, and if I can, in the same motion, ask the city to put a
without
halt on these until we come up with some further
Does that
guidance.
meet the approval of Commissioners 4 and 5 in one motion?
I would second that.
Thank you. Commissioner Jurdevig moves, Commissioner George seconds to approve item number 4 and number 5 as presented to us. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. I would direct staff to work with 2 commissioners. I'd like volunteers, commissioners. Commissioner George, you were gonna get picked anyway. And Commissioner Jurdevig to work with staff on a policy going forward. Thank you.
So do we need a motion to put a moratorium on these, or is that part of the motion?
I think I threw that in as part of the motion.
Okay.
Sure.
And the
It's a
moratorium.
confusing motion, so we'll see how it shows up in the notes.
All right, very good. Thank you all for that. I want to get ahead of myself here. Item number 6 is the approve the amended engineers report and direct engineers to prepare plans and specifications for project number 1316, Phase 2, North Side Sanitary Sewer Collector Rehabilitation. Mr. Scott.
Good evening, and thank you again, Commission President Dardis, members of the Commission. In your packet, you do have an amended engineer's report for our project number 1316 It's specific for Phase 2, but it also includes an update from Phase 1. Last year, if you recall, the Public Works and Engineering initiated a two-phase project to address severe deterioration within the Northside Regional Sanitary Sewer System. The majority of the wastewater throughout the city flows through this particular system. I'm going to pull up just an overview map so that, like I mentioned before, I'm a visual guy. Predominantly the work is between 12th Avenue Northwest and Main Avenue, as denoted by the green lines with the red dots on it, identifying the manholes. This is our main collection system that essentially is taking all of our wastewater flows, even as far south as 52nd Avenue. Everything in the city ends up flowing through these particular pipes, more specifically the north-south pipe here. So, the City Commission authorized Phase 1 in October of last year, which focused basically on inventorying that particular system, getting an idea on the extent of the deterioration, corrosion within our manholes, as well as some other components within that system. And using the results from Phase 1, our engineering team and consultants have been able to prepare options and develop a scope for, specifically now for Phase 2, which will be predominantly where we will go in and either rehabilitate what is possible to rehabilitate or replace what needs to be replaced. The phase will also include some work done at the North Regional Lift Station, which is SA 40 on the north side of town along 12th Avenue. It is on the top side of the map here, just on the west side of the diversion. So here's the diversion channel, if you can follow my cursor. Our main North Regional Lift Station, SA 40, is just on the west side of the diversion, south of 12th Avenue. Completing Phase 2 will result in a reduced risk of the system failures and improved operation of the city's wastewater collection and conveyance system. As noted in the attached report, Public Works and Engineering will continually study and evaluate system needs to continue improving current reliability and accommodate increased demands due to infill and/or expansion. Moore Engineering prepared the amended engineer's report in coordination with the city's Public Works and Engineering departments on February 23rd. The city's review committee voted unanimously in favor of the staff recommendation noted below, which is, of course, to approve the amended engineer's report. Before I get to that, I'm going to continue on this particular report here, the staff summary, where underneath the financial analysis, we share what the original engineer's estimate cost was, $5.5 million. That, again, was presented last year. When the contracts were awarded for Phase 1, again, Phase 1 it was where we specifically went through and conducted a full evaluation of the system. The estimate at that particular time was revised to $4.6 million. The amended engineer's report that is included in your agenda packet here demonstrates a current engineer's estimate of $4,825,000, which is based on Alternative 2, entitled the Selective Rehabilitation and Replacement option. Project funding will be a combination of sewer bonds and/or capital improvement sales tax. There are no special assessments intended to finance this particular project. On the screen here, you can see the prior City Commission actions, starting with including this particular project in the capital improvement plan that was adopted in June of last year. In August is where we brought the original engineer's report forward, which identified Phase 1 and Phase 2. At the very early concept of this project, we did have a Phase 1 project of about $2 million and Phase 3 of $3.5 million, give or take. And the intent originally was to address half the system at a time, but as we moved into the final design efforts for Phase 1, that's where we then took a step back and moved forward with the first phase being purely data-driven and collecting information with specialized contractors. So, that all said, I do want to point out that the amended engineer's report, as noted here, all changes within this particular document from the original engineer's report are underlined, or if there is a new map, it is identified on the map, so that it's somewhat easy to follow what has changed. And again, just focusing back on the financial aspect, there is a summary table here for each phase, identifying at which stages of this project we were providing an engineer's estimate. So, as you can see, originally we had a $5.5 million project identified in the 2020 CIP, and as of today, we are proposing to move forward with a total project cost of $4,825,000. But understand that phase one here is already complete. So, of the new work, we're really talking about, a little over $4.3 million in new work for phase two that we will proceed with preparing final plans and specs for. So with that, I will pause and ask for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Questions for Mr. Scott? As Mr. Scott stated earlier, this has gone before the review committee. During that discussion, which I sit on, there were numerous photos of some of the catch basins and some of the deterioration, serious deterioration of some of the concrete. And so that's part of what this plan is about, is that there is a contractor engaged that specializes in that type of thing. And during that preview committee discussion, Mr. Matt Anvik, the Director of Public Works for the City of West Fargo, said if one of these major catch basins or these manholes were to collapse, we would be in a very serious situation because of the volume and the collector of, as Mr. Scott said, is even south of I-94 all the way down to 32nd Avenue. So this line carries a great deal of what we need to be getting rid of, and thus this is a critical piece of our infrastructure for the City of West Fargo. And thus, after review and discussion, that's why the preview committee voted unanimously to move forward with this. So, Commissioners, what's your pleasure?
It's an important project. I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Jurdevig. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Olson, second. It's been moved and seconded to approve the amended engineer's report and direct the engineer to prepare plans and specifications for 1316 Phase 2. Northside Sanitary Sewer Collector Rehabilitation. We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Scott. Item number 7 is to approve the engineer's report and to direct the engineer to prepare plans and specifications for project number 2260, concrete pavement repairs. Mr. Scott.
Thank you again, Commission President Dardis, members of the Commission. So similar to last fall, we are proposing to commission another concrete pavement repair project, albeit though this one is much larger in scale. Again, we have been working in close relation with Public Works Department to identify where we have significant pavement distress, predominantly on our arterial and collector roadways. This particular project here, we are administrating internally. Our Assistant City Engineer of Transportation Services, Andrew Rucky, is leading the charge to put the design together and has prepared the particular engineer's report that is before you. Again, this particular project will not include special assessment funding. It will be financed with capital improvement sales tax if approved. Attached here, there's the engineer's report with a general nature and scope, the purpose and feasibility, along with the estimated cost that Andrew has prepared. But in addition to the financial information, which is certainly critical, I do want to point out a couple other components of this job that we're hoping to mix in with not just replacing bad panels. There is a scope of work here regarding 23rd Avenue, which is the road in front of Costco, that also needs some attention. I'm going to pull up an additional map here that is not included in your packet. I apologize. But as you can see in the location map, 23rd Avenue is one of the areas that we are proposing to rehabilitate. It's difficult to see on this thing. I know it's you need a magnifying glass, but area A here, just on the south side of the interstate, you can see this area A is out in front of Costco on 23rd Avenue. And so since we're going to be in the area replacing a couple panels, we want to take the opportunity partly to minimize the disruption to the public, and the other part is because it is of critical need. 23rd Avenue currently has an access opening, a full access on the most eastern side of the Costco property that allows drivers to get into, call it the Taco Bell site here. This particular access has proven to be not only an impact to the traffic operations. When I say that, there's added congestion here when left-hand turners, for example, that are turning off of 23rd to come into here, they're stopping, which is causing a backup of traffic into the Veterans Boulevard intersection. But not just that, it is also a very large safety concern with all of these different conflict points. You have left turners out of Costco, left turners coming out of the Taco Bell site, so on and so forth. And so what we would like to do when we're out here replacing a few of these concrete panels is to retrofit a median that will limit this access to right in, right out. And unfortunately, I have some real examples to share. On Saturday, there was a traffic accident out here that actually our police chief was witness to and was on scene. And so on the heels of that accident, I did have an opportunity to talk with Chief Ordinance this morning, and he was able to pull up some history of the accidents in this particular area, and I would like for him to come up and just share his thoughts on closing this particular access. So with that, I would call on Chief Ordinance.
Thank you, Mr. Scott.
Commission President Dardis and Commissioners, I was out with my family this weekend and I was not involved in the accident directly, but did witness a pretty significant accident. You can see the two vehicles pictured there. Mr. Scott took a photograph of the scene there just as our MARC squads were arriving. But after talking with him today about the safety concerns and what their plans are, I'm in strong agreement with the plan to make that a right in, right out. That is a very significant high call volume area for us in terms of accidents. I was able to direct my staff today to produce some numbers, and this is just in relation to the intersection of either 23rd and Veterans or listed as Costco. It's really difficult to discern where the actual accidents happen because of the nature of our records management system and what the callers that call into 911 identify as the location. So the best we could discern on short notice was about 26 accidents from January of 2020 through today's date, so 26 total. Now that doesn't account for things like Mr. Scott previously mentioned, traffic backups for people stopping to make turns, either left or right. So there is some impact to our traffic out on Veterans as well that extends to the south and to the north of that intersection. So.
Thank you, Chief. Questions for the Chief? Appreciate it.
Not so much for the chief, but maybe for both of you. If Dustin, if you could bring up that, diagram where you've got the new, section of
Median, yeah.
median there. I'm a visual guy too. So if I'm a Costco guy coming out of the east, entrance, right immediately across from your red, right there, if I take my right out, and then I'm gonna do a U-E right there, where your cursor is, and what kind of concerns do we have for that area where cars are heading west, and they wanted to go east anyway, and they're gonna come around and make a U-turn there? And then you got people coming out of Costco at that same, spot, and people really, they utilize their turn signals like it's, like it's necessary around here. Like they do in all parts of the country, though, it should be optional equipment for most cars based on how much usage they get. But I'm going a little rant here, but, I'm just concerned about that too.
The chief brought up the same thing to me. So.
Yeah. Commissioner Olson and, fellow commissioners, I did bring that up with Mr. Scott, and, the nice part about if we can direct them westbound out of that lot is there's at least a turn lane where traffic can stop until there's, some clearance and some visibility. And based on my observations, I live in that neighborhood, so I'm through that area quite frequently. Based on my observations, not only from work, but, from a personal standpoint, a majority of our traffic issues are occurring between Veterans Boulevard and that first driveway into Costco, where the gas pumps are, that furthest most east driveway that you're talking about. Again, in talking to Mr. Scott, most people don't utilize, or a lot of people don't utilize that second turn in, and certainly nobody uses the far west end or very few people use the far west end entrance into Costco, which we might be able to direct a few more people that direction. But for the U-turn folks, I brought that up as well. And the nice thing is if you're going to make a left turn there or make a U-turn, there's at least a designated turn there. Now, if there becomes a problem at that intersection that we identify either through accidents or some other means, we could always sign that with a no U-turn to eliminate that.
When I saw this as an agenda item, I spent some time parked across the way, and there is a significant amount of people that buy gasoline, and they're not going into the Costco. They're buying their, Costco has if you got a Costco card, you get a good discount and the like. And it's amazing the number of people that are filling up and aren't going into the retail store. So that, would have a significant impact of directing them west, because I don't think I've ever been by their pumps when they're not full. So when you consider something like this, Mr. Scott and Chief, what's the dialogue that takes place? Being there's an already established traffic pattern for, the developers that have the properties to the south, and of course, the Costco folks, is there a lot of dialogue that takes place with them about that consideration and bringing forth the safety information to them?
Absolutely, a great question, Mr. President. Yes, there certainly will be some dialogue. This is in its early stages, so one thing before I answer that more specifically, I do want to mention that we commissioned a traffic study in this area over a year ago. We are at the end of that study, and so some of the other area impacts are being summarized into not only a document that we can rely on with more technical data and share that with the public, especially the local businesses, but we are also going to have better visuals to take a look at and traffic numbers, so on and so forth. The original thought process was, if you would ask me a year ago what to do out here, I would say let's wait for that study to complete, identify improvements that need to be done, get them into the capital improvement plan and plan accordingly. But over the last, several months as we've been working on this concrete repair project, and we identified that there's some locations out on 23rd that are pretty bad that need to get replaced, it's spurred the discussion that, hey, we're going to be out here shutting down lanes for a period of a few weeks anyway. If there's a desire to close this median, why do the pavement repair work this year and then come back a year or two later and shut things down again and add in a median? I will say that there's other improvements that are being identified within that study, and one of them is a traffic signal, potentially at this intersection at Blue Stem Drive here, and potentially at 6th. There's even an option for a roundabout. You know, I don't foresee that one. That one would be a lot more of a, call it a construction impact, but again, from a traffic flow standpoint, it's a viable option to consider and discuss. Those are the things that I want to bring forward in a plan and put on the shelf for the future. Closing this median off, I think, is more of an immediate need that we really should move forward this year and complete. However, before we would do that, we will certainly reach out to the businesses. We did communicate this particular plan and proposal to Lauren, our Economic and Development Director, so that she can start thinking in terms of how to properly go about and work with the businesses out here. There is a lot of connectivity. You know, you can see here that there are a lot of other ways to get in and out of this commercial development. I think and again, everyone has their own opinions on access, but if we can make this area safer and improve the traffic flow, it's a win-win, albeit there might be some periods of frustration early on in that, you know, I'm used to coming off of Veterans on the 23rd and taking a left into Taco Bell. Now I have to head down to this next street, come back in this back way, but, you know, it's a 2-block change.
Okay. Could you go back to your slide showing the manhole with some of the panels of concrete that have settled? When was 23rd built? Anybody have an idea?
2012, I believe.
2012?
Give me a year, plus or minus. 2011 or 2012.
Okay, thank you. If you'd show me the picture, I have an engineering question for you. So the picture to my left, on the left side up there, when you show these, you call it differential settlement, and obviously that's a term that you engineers probably use quite frequently. What type of warranty do you have on a street that was built in 2012 or in 2021? Is it 2-3 years? Is this something that we see frequently? Is that because of the soil conditions in the valley? Is that inadequate site preparation that when the concrete was you know, it's not level or whatever? Could you address that for me? This is one of our newer roads in West Fargo, and it looks like it needs a lot of repair.
Valid question, great question, and it's one that comes up very often, especially in our climate. We do have a lot of issues with settlement. With concrete pavements, well, I'm going to take your question separated here. The first question being the warranty. We have generally a 1-year warranty with our construction contracts. So, for example, Cheyenne Street, if that was constructed, phase 2 was completed in 2020, there's a 1-year warranty on that, by which if we notice there's a cracked panel or a defect, there's a contractual process to go about having the contractor come out here and evaluate it. Now they can say that I built it according to your plans and specifications. It was tested based on the requirements, and the cracking is nothing I've done. We get into a bit of a situation there that in most cases, there's a cracked panel, contractor usually comes out and fixes it. But point being, there's a 1-year warranty. The issues can be a number of things. There can be the soils move underground. There's again, with all of our construction projects, there is a fair amount of materials testing that is involved, and that goes from the bottom of the trench all the way up. So as they're putting in a pipe, all that material is tested. Once they get to the surface, there's a whole other process of preparing the last, call it, couple feet before you get to the pavement, and all of that stuff is rigorously tested. But there are still movements. We live in the Red River Valley where there's unstable clays for 80 feet. You know, it's not like, I used to work for a consulting firm out in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. We put in a couple inches of asphalt and walked away over top of 4 inches of gravel. That's all that a street section was out there, because you're on rock bed. Mm-hmm. So there are a lot of issues with the ground swelling. Moisture comes in, goes out, there's movement. And concrete pavements, they'll hold up, but now when a crack forms like this and the water seeps in and you have a couple freeze-thaw cycles like this, that starts to just make things worse, and now a transverse crack or a lateral crack like this turns into a pothole that turns into a manhole like this being dislodged or sticking up just right, that somebody comes by on a motorcycle and not good.
So, excuse me, I have one more question, because I've been driving the streets and looking very closely at these at manholes particularly. This is not unusual. So you have a general contractor, an underground contractor, that will put in the catch basin and the manhole and all that. And then is it normally a different contractor that's gonna lay the street, correct?
Generally, yes.
Yes. So my point being is if you drive around town and you look at manhole covers, you see what appears that the cracks originate at the manhole. So is there something that's falling apart between the two engineering groups, or how much material they put in there? What's causing that cracking? Because drive the streets and look down, and you'll see it time and time and time again that the cracks appear to be originating from the manhole.
So maybe I'll step back, and I won't be so quick to answer your question. Dakota Underground, for example, has an underground crew and a paving crew. Dakota Underground put the utilities in and paved the street. I'm not going to say with any degree of certainty, but I believe they were the contractor out here. They were the contractor on segment 3 of Cheyenne. They did the underground and the street pavement.
You answered
Cheyenne.
that question because I was drawing the conclusion it was two different possibility of two different contractors, and, you know, there's...
Long ago, the city used to contract that way. A city, West Fargo, for example, used to issue a contract specifically for the underground utilities, come back, create a street improvement, and pave the street over top. And that was one of the challenges. There were some administration challenges with the multiple improvement districts, but there were also just some constructability challenges in phasing it like that. And as contractors locally started to grow in size, the ability was there with a Dakota Underground, Northern Improvements, Master Construction to do both phases of work. And so I would say more often than not, there is one operation out here doing both work. Now, those contractors have an underground crew and a paving crew, so they're two separate crews, but all the same contractor. And again, our designs, especially for manholes in our concrete pavements, there is what's called a floating manhole casting. That casting is by design free to move, but yet we still end up with this type of cracking, and predominantly at these manholes.
Thank you, sir. Commissioners, additional questions?
Just one.
Please, Commissioner Olson.
So, if we approve this project, is our Public Works Department gonna actually do the concrete pouring and all that kinds of stuff, or, you know, because you said it's in-house, so I just wanna make sure it's all clear as to who's doing it.
Engineering was done in-house.
Great question, Commissioner Olson, yes. Let me clarify that. Internally, the engineering is being done.
Okay.
What we are trying to do, and we started this last year, is, you know, Public Works, albeit they can come out here and replace a panel or two, in a given year, in fact, I think in 2018 or 19, they did a few different locations on big streets, but that's really about their limitation. And these types of things are really meant for the larger scale contractors that have a lot more efficiencies to come in here, take 4 or 5 panels, get them replaced, return the roadway back to drivable conditions within a couple of weeks. So no, our intent is that we want to create a program where we are doing these annually until at least we catch up, where these larger rehab type projects will be designed internally by engineering, administrated, you know, the construction administration, all that stuff internally with our engineering department, where we will go out and hire a contractor to come in and work on these. And again, being that these are on predominantly arterial collector roadways, there will be a fair amount of communication that will go out so that we can notify the traveling public of the 1 to 2 weeks. Some roads might be 3 to 4 weeks of an impact, some will be 1 to 2. It all depends on which particular site we're at. As you can see here, right now we're proposing 14 locations. And again, with 23rd Avenue, we are also proposing to put on a median, which I don't know if that would take all that much more effort. about 2008 or 9, out in front of the West Fargo High School on 9th Street, at the 8th Avenue intersection, we scabbed on a median. You know, it's about a 2 to 3 foot wide median, and it was a relatively simple process, so.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Scott. Additional questions? Commissioners,
I'd
thoughts?
make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Jurdevig. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Second by Commissioner George. Been moved and seconded to approve the engineer's report and to direct the engineering department to prepare plans and specifications for project number 2060, the concrete pavement repair project.
Just one quick question.
Please, Commissioner
Is
Olson.
the median at 23rd Avenue included in that?
That's, I guess, my
I just want to make sure it's part of your estimates.
So, I'm not 100% sure. I'd have to default that question to Andrew. I believe he's on. I would say, if I had to answer it, I would say no, but there might be that quantity in there. I would say it's a relatively inexpensive portion of work, probably $10,000, but I will let Andrew answer that if he's available online.
Yes, Andrew's online. Go ahead, Andrew.
The current engineer's estimate that you have does not include the median. The median suggestion or discussion has really ramped up in the last week after this engineer's report was prepared and submitted to the commission. We would update with the plans and specs a new engineer's estimate, including that median work.
All right, so, would clarify to the motion in the second, it does not include that, so the motion, you assume that. So where are we at? Where?
I'm good making a motion to approve, the engineer's report and direct the engineer to prepare plans and specs for project 2260.
Does not include the new median.
Defined, correct.
All right, is it second? That's okay with you?
Yeah, just a quick clarification then, if they come back with the median, does that come through us?
Yes.
Okay, then, yeah, second, yeah.
Because I'm gonna wanna make sure that we've had communication with the business community in that area. So I'm gonna request that, please. So, we have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye, please.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you.
Quick five.
It's been requested for a 5-minute break. We stand adjourned.
Half time. Let's hope not.
Just a reminder to everyone, we are live on YouTube while we're in this room. So if you want to have conversations, I would recommend going into the hallway. Thank you.
We're gonna go for the record tonight.
Reminder again, we're live on YouTube, so.
Well, President accounted for.
West Fargo City Commission meeting for March 1st will reconvene. We are on item number 8. Mr. Scott, if you approve the task order number 35-2 for sidewalk improvement district number 6056.
Thank you again, Commission President Dardis, members of the Commission. Before you is a task order with More Engineering for the Design and Construction Administration Services for our sidewalk improvement project that we started last year. As you can see down in here in the process timeline, the engineer's report was approved August 3rd of 2020. In December of 2020, the City Commission reviewed some additional work that was submitted by the Park District and approved an amended engineer's report moving forward with that additional work. So not only are we doing the city sidewalk stuff where we're filling in gaps for residential properties, we're also adding, have added some work for the Park District. Then on and I'm sorry, on December 21st is when the amended engineer's report was approved. And at that same meeting is when the final plans and specifications were authorized to move forward. So as such, even though it's probably a month late, we are finally getting around to actually getting the task order prepared to move forward with those actual final plans and specifications. The amount of the task order is by our master service agreement that was established in 2018, is based on a percent of construction for the design and construction administration services. So I believe, I'll get to the table here. The estimated design compensation based on the 11%, we're looking at $95,590, and based on the master service agreement, again, that was established in 2018, the threshold at which the city commission needs to review is $50,000, which is why this is before you. I guess, again, getting back up to the summary here, just to reiterate that this is our sidewalk project that we started last year, where we are intending to fill gaps in developed areas. We have an ordinance that requires, once an area is 80% established, that we will give property owners the opportunity to either build the sidewalk themselves, or we will come through and install it for them, of course using special assessment as our financing mechanism. But each of these property owners were basically given that opportunity, that choice. So, again, the amended engineer's report was approved back in December, so this is purely to move forward with our final plans and specifications.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. I have a question for you. This is in some of the neighborhoods where there's gaps, where the lots haven't been built on yet. We're going to build sidewalks in front of those lots.
Yep. Yes.
How is that assessed, number one? The sidewalk. So if there's not a property owner there, but there's an owner of the lot?
Okay. I think I'm following your... So, correct me if I'm wrong, Commissioner President. The question is, if the work is... So that right now we've got, say, 60 properties. And these 60 properties are spread throughout predominantly the south half of the city, but there are some on the north side. Regardless, the question is, when we get done with all this work, how are we assessing each property owner? And the answer is, we will actually measure every piece of work that goes in front of every particular property. So if there's 60 properties, we will measure each property individually, and that becomes their assessment. So this isn't spread evenly. So if property X is 100 feet wide and property Z is 50 feet wide, property X is going to have a higher assessment because we will track and measure that accordingly.
Okay, thank you. My next question, having been around the construction business all my life, you're pouring concrete sidewalks, and then there's going to be form trucks that are going to drive over it. There's going to be possibly a concrete pumper or concrete trucks. It's going to destroy these sidewalks. How do we deal with that?
Good question. So it certainly becomes a challenge for the builder, but again, the builder or the property owner has elected not to do this themselves, but they will have to call it bridge the sidewalk as best they can. So by doing what's called bridging, they'll install gravel or clay material over top of that and really limit their access. So traditionally, a new development turns into a bit of a war zone because it's a free-for-all. Once you start requiring sidewalks and driveways go in, now they need to be a little more cautious on what they are doing because that is their sidewalk that they are, well, it's in our right-of-way, it's our sidewalk, but usually they either protect it or they will come in, remove 20 feet of it while they're building a house and put that 20 feet back. But what this project is intending to do is some of these properties might not build for 10 years. There were lots in Charleswood, for example, that sat for 15, 20 years. And we have more of a responsibility to the homeowners that are out there in terms of pushing a stroller up and down the sidewalks, that if there's one property that's allowed to just sit vacant, now that stroller is being navigated into a street. So that's why we put an ordinance in place, and I'm not sure how long ago that ordinance was written, but requiring once a development is 80% established, we will initiate a sidewalk improvement like this to fill in those gaps.
And so the public understands, we get calls, we get pressured to put when there's gapping, because people want their kids to be able to ride the bike or they want to go for their walk. So, just so the public understands, engineering, planning and zoning, whomever, is constantly being called to fill in these gaps, so there's continuancy of walkability and all of those types of things. But there are some drawbacks as well. So I just wanted that stated for the public, and you did a nice job. Thank you. Any additional questions from Mr. Scott? For task order number 35-2 for sidewalk improvement district number 6056, Mr. Scott, would you put on the screen again for the total dollar amount?
Absolutely.
I don't have that on my sheet.
And I will point out, so here's the table, that the task order at hand here is $95,590. There is a note, just for transparency purposes, that there were two previous task orders already executed, and so the combination of all task orders to date now, there's 3 of them, for the preliminary engineering and surveying services, along with this one, the total engineering that we are at is $123,590.
Thank you, sir.
I'll make the motion to approve task order 35-2.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner George seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the engineers to report and direct the engineer to prepare plans and specifications for project 2260 for a total of $123,590. Is there any further discussion? Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Item number 8 is to approve a task. I just did that one. My apologies. Item number 9, adopt a resolution for the issuance of refunding bonds, improvement bonds, Series 2021A and 2021B. Mr. Larson. Good evening.
Good evening, Commissioner President Dardis and Commissioners. Thank you for the time tonight. It's late, so we'll try to get everything out on the table here so that you can take action. We've been working with our financial advisor consultant, Colliers, Mike Manstrom, who is here tonight, if you have any questions them, and also with our bond attorney and city attorney, John Shockley, to look at refinancing 2 bond issues that are currently held. These are refunding improvement bonds. The issues that are looking to be refunded are 2013A and 2013B. With today's pricing and the work that's been performed by our financial consultants, we're really pleased to be able to report to you that we've been able to go out and get excellent pricing today, which is also very important because right now the market has become very volatile. Last Friday I was listening to the radio and the news on it, and it's moving, and it's not moving in the direction we want. So we might see the opportunities to refinance like this slowing down. Our original estimate was approximately $1.4 million in savings, which is excellent. But I'm happy to report that they did a much better job, and they did $1.873 million in savings, or 30% improvement over the original estimate. So we're really pleased about that. So just to let you know also what happens, when we're able to refinance a refunding improvement bond, that saving is passed directly back to the assessments or the homeowners. Unfortunately, we are not able to do it up front. When you refinance a home, you're able to reduce your annual payment or your monthly payment. Here, we are not able to do that, but it does shorten the life of the bond issue or the collection from the home. We did one of these. The preliminary reduction will reduce it by approximately 3 years. That's significant when you look at a 25-year bond or collection on the assessment. So we're really pleased for that because we'll pass that for sure directly to the residents. They were priced today. We'd received an excellent pricing bid on that, and so the request tonight is for a commission to consider approving the resolution to issue the bonds based on today's earlier action. As I said, we have Mike Manstrom here, and also John Shockley to answer any questions you might have regarding the issue.
Questions for Mr. Larson, Mr. Mantrum, or Mr. Shockley? Anyone? Do you have something that you'd like to share with us this evening?
Excuse me, President Dardis and Commissioners, just a brief little bit of information. This is a somewhat different refunding in that the 2013 A bonds are tax-exempt bonds. The 2013 Bs are tax-exempt bonds also, but they're not currently callable till May 1st of 22. The Series A bonds were callable May 1st of 21. So that's a current refunding, and we have a taxable advance refunding. The Series Bs are a taxable advance refunding because we are not allowed by the SEC to advance refund tax-exempt bonds. Now, this works because, and we're using taxable rates on the Series B, which are normally 25 to 50 basis points higher than tax-exempt rates. But in today's market, the rates and the spread is so condensed that we're doing a number of advance refundings and refunding tax-exempt bonds with taxable bonds, taxable interest rates. Both of these issues have a almost 10% present value benefit. So it worked very well. We sold it as a Series A and a Series B bond issue for that purpose.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Shockley, you have anything to add?
No, I think Mike and Jim did a really good job.
I recently, over the weekend, had conversations with the mayor from another city about 100 miles away and another commissioner about 55 miles away, and they were asking me about bonding and some other developments and the like, and when they asked us what we were refinancing our bonds for, they were very impressed. They don't have the same type of security deposits that we have, reserves, and so thank you.
I would like to add, Moody's reaffirmed this as an A1 rating, and that's one of the strengths they talk about is your significant reserves, as well as the strength of the economic activity in the city of West Fargo.
Thank you.
Maintains the A1 that gets us the very low interest rates we're looking for when we underwrite a bond issue like this.
And that's something that all of West Fargoans take, the success of that is all of West Fargo. There's no doubt about it. I want to clarify or restate something Mr. Larson said earlier. We're one of the few communities in the state of North Dakota that when we do refinance the bonds and we do know what those savings are, that West Fargo, if it's a 25-year bond, we do not charge the taxpayers the 25 years. If we have a saving and it ends at 22 years, the assessments stop at 22 years. I can name a dozen cities across the state of North Dakota that does not do that. And so those people have been calling us and asking us how long we've been doing it, and would you consider changing your policy because they're going the full 25 years even when the bonds have been satisfied. And I adamantly think that that's wrong, and that's a commendable thing for commissions previous to us, as well as the sitting commission, that we stay with that.
We had this question in December when I came with that other refunding, and this really clarifies the question for you guys as well. I think it was Commissioner Simmons that asked the question that evening. So now we've got it on the record as to how the city of West Fargo handles their refunding proceeds.
The taxpayers are not charged a penny more than they need to satisfy that bond. So good work by previous staff and administration, and we're proud that we continue that. Thank you, sir. Any more questions, commissioners, with regard to the refunding improvements bonds? Thank you, Commissioner Jurdebig. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner George seconds. Been moved and seconded to adopt a resolution for the issuance of refunding improvement bonds, Series 2021A and 2021B. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you.
On behalf of Colliers, thank you again for the opportunity to work
Thank you,
for
sir.
the city.
Appreciate you coming to visit us. Item number 10 is a resolution directing assessments to be levied. There are pages 184 to 2002. I will remind everyone in the room that this was an item that was on the consent agenda and has been moved to the regular agenda. And I'll turn to Commissioner George.
There's been a request from the public, to take 2250 and address that as a separate issue.
Okay, so with that being said, thank you for the clarification, Commissioner George. Commission, I'd be looking for a motion on the other district numbers for approval, and we'll take 2250 as a separate item.
I'll make the motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Is there a second, please? Commissioner Jurdevig, seconds. Been moved to second to direct the assessments to be levied for sewer, water, storm, and street improvements on district numbers 1321, 1322, 1323, 1325, and 1329. Also, for the street improvement district of 2245 and stormwater improvement district 4063. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carried. Okay. Now, Commissioner George, you made the request. There's a street improvement district of 2250 to have a discussion separately on this one.
Yes, and there's several people from the public on this one that, I'm going to actually request that they speak on this one since they came and they can help me out with this. But the biggest issues, there's multiple issues with this one. There's been a couple of change orders on this one that, as far as the excessive loads of dirt and the shrinkage factor and it being unfair because, you know, engineering, you know, the question if they made a mistake, I believe they did. So I'm not okay with that change order being part of that special assessment. This also was originally bid at 32 million. It's now, you know, close to 70 million. And, there's a lot of issues with this one. So, like I said, the people that came from the public, I would really like to request, if that would be okay with everybody, if they could speak on this one and their feelings on this one. And, you know, we need to either come to the point where obviously we vote on it, or we table it, or we come to a compromise. I would suggest trying to come to a compromise at some point on this one. But like I said, I would like to hear from the public on this.
Clarification first. The 32 million versus 70 million.
I would like to have...
Somebody address that for me, please.
Sorry, excuse me, President Dardis. I would like to have our city engineer come up and explain, because the 70 million is the entire project of Cheyenne Street from 13th to 40th. So that we've already done sections 1 and 2. The interchange and everything up to 13th has already been assessed. That was part of that 70 million. This is the remainder from Interstate to 32nd. But I'll let Mr. Scott explain that.
Engineer.
Well, good evening again, and thank you, Commissioners. Commissioner George, the total project in reference to tonight's resolution includes everything, the interchange, all the way down to 40th Avenue. Now, the original bid being 32 million, I guess I'm not sure what that's in reference to. There were various stages of the job. In 2017, there was an engineer's estimate provided that covered segments 2 and 3 alone, so it didn't include the interchange. And I believe that engineer's report had, and I can't recall for sure, I'd have to look this up, but I want to say, 39 million something. And again, that was specifically for everything on segments 2 and 3. It did not include the interchange. It did not include the additional work that was added on Kensington Drive. And again, that was well before either project was designed, final design and bid. When we awarded contracts for segment 2 sometime in 2018, I think April of 18, there was a revised estimate at that time. I'd have to look what that estimate was. Later on in 18, we did publish assessments, pending assessments, to our city's system that property owners could view. The average assessment for a typical residential household was $3,154, if I remember right. And that was based on a total project cost of $32 million, plus or minus. And again, I'm using rough numbers. I'd have to go and research that. But again, that number was just the total amount being assessed. The resolution that Jim has prepared with our attorney, Mr. Shockley, that's including all of the work done, again, on the interchange, which includes the storm lift station up on the interchange, includes work done on Kensington Drive, along with segments 2 and 3. And yes, there were several change orders on both segments in the 20s. Now, the change order that you're referencing, as far as relating to the dirt, that change order was reviewed back in February of 2020, I believe. I've got copies of that commission agenda packet.
I think it was before that, because I don't think I was part of the commission yet.
So you can see here, February 3rd, 2020 was when the city commission reviewed. And the packet includes actually 2 different change orders, but one of them is relating to the dirt. And I don't know if the intent here tonight is for me to walk through this step by step, but the long and short of it is, the commission...
Are you okay with...
Yeah.
The summary to this point. We'll get to your, the job.
What I guess I would like to hear is the people from the public, specifically questions, concerns, comments that they have, and then maybe address them after.
Okay.
Sure.
That's fine. Thank you, Mr. Scott.
You bet.
So who do we have from the public that would like to, could I get a show of hands just so I know how many? Okay. Okay. Please join us at the podium. Good evening.
Good evening. Elton Tufty, 4200 Carmel Place. That's why I ask questions. If I don't understand something, I try to ask. This particular job piqued my interest. I was at a meeting for listening to another topic when this change order came through. And I had questions on it. I have asked the commission 3 different times some questions. I either got partial answers or no answers. The special commission meeting that was held over at the Element, I brought it up there, because I still had questions about the change order. And my question to you folks, and it was just the 4 of you there, was what can I do to avoid getting to this point? Can we talk about it? Can we investigate, figure out what went on with it? Because I didn't want it to get to this point when this thing is at the point of being approved and run through. So then when I looked at the schedule or the agenda for the meeting, I see it was already on there, and I hadn't heard back on anything that we could discuss ahead of time. So one of my questions is the change order for this one, for the $222,000, was presented to you at the, as you said, I think it was February 3rd meeting. And the change order is written up, the disposal of the excess soil, and it indicates that typical engineering and design assumptions for this region, i.e. a factor of 25%, likely did not hold true for factors such as shrinkage and compaction. It was on to talk about the 178 cubic yards of material that needed to be removed. So there were 3 parties that dug into this thing to determine, and I'm not sure why there were 3, there had to be some concerns of why there was so much dirt that had to be pulled off. And KLJ sent a report, and there is also an email in here that says that the city is in agreement with KLJ's response. KLJ's response says 21% of that 13 and some thousand cubic yards of material was due to shrinkage. And that was the only thing that the commission heard about that night at the meeting. So I'm not accusing anybody of anything. I don't understand it. Maybe you folks did. But it's also stating 41% of it was due to the excavation of the pond. Contractor clearly states that this thing was designed and bid as a job needing dirt hauled in, and instead they end up hauling 1,100 truckloads out. And there's also on their chart that 37% of the dirt was the displacement of the pipe structure and waste. And in one other report that has similar numbers to it, they called it pipe and manholes. So I'm trying to understand, you know, we were told that night, or you were told this wasn't anybody's mistake. To me, it looks like a mistake, and I would just like to understand how it could be presented as shrinkage when only 21% had to do with shrinkage. And then I did have questions, and I shared some things with Mandy today. Like I said, I saw this on the agenda, and when the final number came through at 69 million, and it was 39 million was the engineer's report, and that says segments 2 and 3. But I did request the open records on 2250, and I saw nothing in there about segment 1 being included in this. I didn't find any engineer's report for the whole project. Everything I found was related to 2 and 3. So again, I'm asking questions. I don't have the answers. I'm not accusing anybody of anything. I just think, I'm not sure this was properly represented to the commission when it went through as only a shrinkage issue.
I guess my question would be also is, when you're this grossly off of, on your numbers, why isn't the engineer, that prepared this, their company, partially responsible at least for such a gross overestimate, instead of the taxpayers having to cover that mistake, which I know they'll say isn't a mistake, but kind of looks like it to me.
Well, Bernie, you said you've been around the sign business 44 years. I've only been around the construction business for 41, but I've spent a lot of time around dirt contractors, and I've been on the Garrison diversion and the Keystone pipeline job, and I have a little bit of an understanding about some of these things. And when you start looking at a windrow of dirt as big as this was, or picture 1,132 trucks lined up hauling dirt off a job that was supposed to have dirt hauled in, I have a hard time believing that's not a mistake someplace along the line.
Thank you, Mr. Tufting. There's several questions going around here, so let's try and answer them one at a time.
That's only a few of them.
Okay, well, we'll get you some more.
You want me to sit, or you want me to sit here and answer anything else?
Can we clarify the difference between the 32 million and the 70 million? I realize it's phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3, and I think we're just not adding the projects up. Is it as simple as that, or is it not? With the change orders, obviously.
Right.
I'll defer to our city engineer, Dustin Scott, because I did misspeak when I said that included all 3 sections, and he just clarified that to me, so I'll let Dustin make that clear.
Okay. Very good. Thank you. So we'll take that first question. Is that all right, Commissioner George?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. Please. Mr. Scott.
Yep, thank you again, Commissioners. So the reference here, the 69 million, includes the interchange, which...
That's the 40th Avenue interchange, is that what you're...
the I-94... The
interstate interchange.
The interstate interchange, their lift station, so $20 to $25 million. I wasn't prepared to get into such detail, but yes, this project includes everything basically from Beaton Drive down to 40th Avenue. So there's $20 to $25 million of interstate interchange, lift stations. Then there's segment 2, which gets down to 32nd Avenue. Segment 3 gets from 32nd down to 40th. And there's also a little small component of $150,000 or so of Kensington Drive that was also added. And along the way, there were, again, multiple change orders that the City Commission has reviewed. There was, I believe that particular change order was a 44-page document that was available to the Commission for review. Those change orders were approved. They've been paid. So, like anything else that's been constructed, it's been paid, which is why it's reflecting now in the total constructed cost. But again, one of the difficulties in comparing numbers, again, if you look at the engineer's report from 2017, that was very specific to just segments 2 and 3, did not include the $20 to $25 million of DOT interchange work. Yep.
Commissioner.
Comment that, or make a statement, because I mean, the difference between the 69 million and the 32 million is the 37 million from other contributions. Correct? I mean, that's really what the question is. The other contributions is largely from the state.
And that's maybe something I'm not understanding what the, I believe Mr. Tufti brought up that there was a $39 million number.
If you look at page 196, Dustin, if you can get...
I can give you the
Yep.
two pieces of paper I was looking at. That's the original engineer's report, this is what was attached to these.
Exactly. So there, like I said, the original engineer's report that was approved back in October of 2017, there's a total project cost identified of $39,271,000. But again, this did not include the $25 million of DOT interchange work. It also did not include the Kensington Drive. It also did not include, some of the other things, you know, there's been some other changes that occurred since the time this report was done.
So that amount would be most comparable to the 32 million that we're talking about.
Well, if there's a number to try to tie together, I suppose it would be, the local share. So there, in this engineer's report back in October of 17, there's a local share of $28,271,000. And in this resolution, there's a total amount to be assessed, which would, you know, again, local share would be $32,270,000. So, but again, there's still a challenge in comparing apples to apples. And then, like we walked through when if you recall our brown bag back in February, where we talked about the improvement process and the different stages at which we start providing estimates, the engineer's report is at an early stage prior to final designs taking place. And so, to be fair, if there needs to be a comparison to see if there's been something that's screwed up, let's look at when we awarded contracts for segment 2, when we awarded contracts for segment 3. Now, segment 3 wasn't designed until late in 18.
Okay.
So,
Could I request this of you? Does this meet with your approval? That in the next week, Commissioner George be given the items of the different segments, to the differentiation between 32 million and 70 million. I know you're giving it a verbal, but
I'm okay
with
that part of it.
Okay.
Truly, for me personally, the biggest issue is the change order and the dirt.
Okay.
That's my personal biggest issue.
So then we're done with that? Mr. Tufti, you have any more questions on that particular issue?
Restate what you said, I didn't quite catch it.
Well, we've been trying to discuss, we weren't totally aware of what the discussion issues were going to be this evening. So when we talk about 39 million, 32 million, or 70 million, we can get you those breakdowns, and then whatever, change orders apply to phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. And we'll provide that to Commissioner George.
Yep, that's fine.
All commissioners, please. Now, let's address, again, and we had a lengthy discussion the last time when we were talking about the dirt. And as Mr. Tufti said earlier, part of that project was the reshaping of the retention pond as well as phase 3, okay? So if you would, please, Mr. Scott.
Absolutely. So there is a 44-page document that went around. Now, again, I have not gone through every component of that, at least recently, but the gist of it is, like Mr. Tufti alluded to, there were multiple parties involved in reviewing this. So let's start back in August of 2019, I believe, is when that work started taking place. Now, at the time, the project was under direction of our Public Works Director at the time, who was identified by the DOT as the local responsible charge. So he was initially involved with, hey, we're generating a lot of material, is the claim from the contractor, what are we going to do here? I honestly didn't quite get involved until later on in that year where the paperwork started coming through, and as a result of paperwork coming through, now the contractor's wanting to get paid, we got representatives from the Department of Transportation, who were obviously managing the job, representatives from KLJ and Moore Engineering, who are the consultants of the job, along with the contractor, also hired their independent engineer to take a look, because we all were in that mode of, what happened here? Who is at fault? What's going on? And the short answer is that, as it's laid out in these in this document here, there's a few factors, but the primary factor was when the design was put together, and that quantity of dirt established by which unit price bidding occurred, that was based on a 25% shrinkage factor for that clay. And the best that they could come up with was that the actual behavior of that material was at a different shrinkage factor, and so there were losses that occurred, or extras that occurred, that the contractor was handling. It reminds me of, the meeting on February 3rd. Wasn't any easier for me to explain it, aside from here is the report, and there's several other pages. There were several meetings, and these meetings that, again, involved all of these entities, city staff, DOT staff, and the consultants, and then, again, the contractor. The premise is, let's figure out what happened, and all that coming together, the best answer I can give you is in that document.
And the calculation used was a 5% shrinkage? What was the calculation?
Industry standards on clay work is generally going to be a 25% shrinkage factor.
25%.
Mm-hmm. So,
I mean, I see what you're saying. I just feel like with any of the engineering firms, there's no incentive to be right, because they're just going to say, oh, we'll just special assess it back out to the homeowners, which I don't think is an acceptable way to operate, and everybody's going to stand up for each other. So.
And in all fairness, Commissioner George, having been on that side of it, I can tell you, as a professional engineer, I never woke up wondering how I could pull one over the taxpayer to better my financial cause. There is a standard of ethics that we are all adhered to. My standard of ethics were actually challenged on this particular matter with the State Board of Registration, who has reviewed this. And along with Moore Engineering, was underneath that same accusation. And again, the board has dismissed it, but I would be more than willing to sit down with anybody and go through the detail of it, but I can tell you that me personally and the team that I work with do not try to pull one over the eyes and just say, now the special assessments will take care of it.
Excuse me for a moment, but I'm going to go to Mr. Shockley on a question. Okay, this money's all been spent. And and the intent of the what we have in front of us this evening is to direct the assessment. So we've got to be paying people, right? So we have lots of questions here. There's a willingness to sit down by Mr. Scott. And of course, Commissioner George is on point with this and bringing it forward. Mr. Tufte's been one of the spokesmen. So we still need to act on this evening. If there's some questions that need to be answered, then we have to deal with that as a separate issue. Because legally, we've got an issue of bond for this, correct?
Yeah, and...
Please, Mr. Shockley.
Thank you, Mr. Commission President. And maybe just a clarification where we are procedurally. And I want to correct a misstatement. I don't know who made it. This is not the end of the line, so to speak. This is the very, very first baby step. In the step to levy assessments, you have to direct the assessment commission to go meet, and here's a number, and go levy the assessment. There's still plenty of opportunities to figure out what the assessment for individual property owners are, and whether or not the city is going to add additional funds in when it comes back to you, which it will. It's required to by law. It'll come back to you in probably 4 to 6 months, based upon a public hearing before the assessment commission, multiple meetings. And so there's ample opportunity to investigate and look at this issue. Tonight was just supposed to be a procedural issue to direct the Special Assessment Commission, go start your meeting process. It's not really to talk about the merits of whether the costs are too high, whether they're too low, whether they're just right. It's just a procedural step in the process.
Thank you for clarification, Mr. Shockley.
Quick question. Legally, is there ever a situation where the firm or the contractor or whatever does have to pay, has historically paid for any of the mistakes? Has that ever happened?
Yes, I can comment in West Fargo's history. We have had claims against engineering firms, and they have paid under their professional liability insurance. I'll be frank, the challenge we have here is the change order has been paid. Everybody agreed, the commission signed off on the change order. You've paid the claim. There's no more claim. And so, right, wrong, or indifferent, the claim has been paid, and now the city has to come up with the funds to pay for it. And
Mrs. Fisk.
Excuse me, I just wanted to clarify, thank you, Commission President Dardis and Commissioners, that when we bonded for this project, we bonded for the full 32 million, what's that say, 270,000. So within our bond that we got as a whole, that full number is in there. So even when you say, well, the city should, even if you said the city should pay $222,708, we still have to special assess the 32,270,000. What would happen is that money would just sit in a debt service fund until 20-some years from now, when finally we can pay it off. So logistically, once the change orders are approved and once we approve all the final payments, and we bond, that's the end of the line. Thank you.
Comments, Commissioners? Thoughts?
I guess from my perspective on the dirt issue, I think it's been discussed before this commission before quite in depth. It has been evaluated by most firms that were involved in the project. It's actually not in front of the state board to review it, which said there wasn't an issue. I don't think there's, I'm certainly not qualified as an engineer to know about it.
I'll make the motion to adopt the resolution on 2250.
Excuse me, we allowed Mr. Tufti to speak earlier. Come on up and make your point. Pardon me for interrupting.
I wish we would have stayed home tonight. Your engineer just talked about, explained this job and this change order, and all you heard him talk about was the shrinkage factor. Same thing as when this thing got approved. I'm very disappointed that he keeps coming back to that when that was 21% of the reason for that extra dirt. And there's been no explanation. He didn't even mention about the fact of the pipe. Jeff Johnson, his company that did that job, I knew Louis Johnson very well. Matter of fact, we both worked at the same company at one point in time. They run a hell of a good operation. I called and talked to someone from Johnson Construction.
Dakota Underground.
Dakota Underground, I'm sorry.
Yes, sir.
Not Dakota Underground. And I'm not going to get in detail of who I talked to or what they said. But they're also questioning why this was presented the way it was and not all the facts came out. So to me, there's an obvious error someplace along the line that happened in this. Either the pipe wasn't accounted for, somebody, and I don't know if it would be the engineer or if it's the contractor that's supposed to make that adjustment. But when the highest percentage of the dirt is tagged to the fact it was pipe, to me that's somebody's error. And the engineer brought up the board in Bismarck, and yes, that's true. And this was one of the topics that was filed. I was involved in that for the very same reason. We're certain there was an error someplace in here, and the presentation and this documentation was there. It was pushed through on a 21%, only 21% accountability for the dirt was exposed to you guys. No explanation for the rest of it. That's the kind of thing that, and there were other examples, and I wouldn't have brought that up except he brought it up. I guess one other question on the line of this, and I'm not sure if I heard everything correct, but this has to be acted on tonight and pushed forward. Is that correct?
This is already in process.
Correct.
Your questions can be addressed. We can move forward with that, absolutely, Mr. Tufty. If there's, you want a review again and sit down with KLJ, I would help facilitate that, or Mr. Scott, if that's the case. In determining the dirt, as you say, you know, the shrinkage was at 21%.
No, 21% of the total of the dirt moved was...
Total of the dirt moved was 21%. Yes, you're correct. I misspoke. Thank you for correcting me. So if we want to discuss those issues, that's fine. But it's in the process of how we're going to do this. We've already issued the bonds for the total cost of this. So now, as Mrs. Fisk has said, if we want to take the $222,000 out of the bond, you can't do that. It's been for the full amount. Is that not correct, Mr. Shockley?
Yeah, and you're correct, Mr. Commission President, and this isn't the end. I'll keep reiterating that this is not the end of the line. This is the first baby step in the process. It goes to the Special Assessment Commission.
So your Special Assessment Committee will have public comment.
Correct.
There's another opportunity. And the chairman of the Special Assessments Committee is sitting in this room.
And we've been through this process before in 4060. None of you guys were here when that whole thing took over. But when it passed through the commission and went to the Special Assessment Committee, we met with them, we did the right thing, and we filed our paperwork in protest of what was going on with that. And that was all over 130 acres or 120 acres of property being assessed very highly, and another 120 acres that got little or nothing. We went to the Special Assessment Commission. We were told by them, all we do is we get the number, and that's my understanding of it, and they divide it up fairly. So they just take whatever number you guys forward to them and they divide it up. So then we had to file to come back and talk in front of you guys. And we did that, and what did we hear? We have to rely on what the Special Assessment Commission did. So you listened to what they came back with and you passed that.
With changes.
Pardon?
We changed that. What the Special Assessment Committee, if we're going to talk about both issues, and I'm not arguing with you, Elton, if you recall 4060, when that came in here, Mr. Jurdevig made the motion that we also took additional tax dollars. We lowered it from
9 cents to 10 cents.
From 10 cents to 9 cents. We dropped it another penny on it, and then Mr. Jurdevig made a motion where there was X number of dollars also committed to the project. So we did make an adjustment because the neighborhood was appealing.
But what you didn't know at the time was that the engineers at Moore Engineering, in an email that we have possession of, and I think you guys have seen copies of it, said 53% of the water was coming from Nelson Acres, 47% was coming from the ones that got the heavy assessments. You were presented with 2% came from Nelson Acres.
Yes, sir.
That's another reason we went to Bismarck.
All right.
One more step in the process. We were told by the city attorney that if we didn't agree with the final decision made by the commission, we could appeal the decision in district court. That's bad advice. When you appeal a decision, you're not allowed to bring in new information. So the only thing that they could present in court was that 2% of that water came across. The 53% that was identified by Moore Engineering, we brought it to court, was not considered.
Mr. Tufty.
I'm done.
Mr. Tufti, when our attorney said you could appeal it in district court, that is absolutely true. If your attorney wasn't aware of whether or not that they could bring in new information, with all due respect, sir, that's on your attorney, not Mr. Shockley's
in the
advice,
Century Code.
because there is a process that you could go to district court. I don't mean to argue with you, but that's the way it worked. I mean, your attorney should have known the procedural elements of how they deal with it.
But your attorneys that we were paying for with our tax dollars were better and stronger than the ones that we had, and they made sure the judge did not allow any of that in, and they stated the Century Code that says if we are appealing your decision, and right, you guys made the right decision on the information you had in front of you.
Thank you, sir.
I
appreciate
I appreciate the time.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Scott, did you want to?
Thanks again, Commissioners. So I do want to get back to the point of talking through this again. If I would certainly be willing to reach out to the consultants that were involved. I will personally call Jeff Johnson myself. Again, I'm not the one that intimately goes through all of this and understands it in and out. So when I present it to the commission, I give a brief summary. So I say, again, I'll go through this briefly and point out a few of the things, but the document is there. And if it takes, we'll go through line item by line item with all of these representatives at the meeting. I'm certainly willing to do that.
Who in, Mr. Tufti, who in the group that's bringing all this discussion? I see some other friends out there that are very capable of doing this too. But Mr. Tufti, Mr. Scott, and is it KLJ that you want to bring in, or is it Jeff Johnson from Dakota?
I'd like to start with the DOT. I want to get the DOT in here. I'd like to get the contractor, KLJ, Moore Engineering, everyone that had any input into this. I didn't write all of this. I presented it. Just like the 40-60 thing. I didn't. Now, some of the tables, by the way, that are getting thrown, these percentages, 2% versus 50, and there's an email chain. If you read it, I'll sit down with anyone that wants to, and I'll explain item by item. There's a lot of things that get taken out of context, and it's hard to come back and explain after the fact, but there's some quick sound bites that can be thrown out there that are unfortunately it's a misunderstanding, and unfortunately, sometimes there's a matter of a legal issue that we can't have certain meetings. But I'm certainly willing to do that with this dirt change order and any other topic.
Mr. Tufti, would you like to, on 2250, would you be willing to sit down with that group?
Absolutely.
All right. What would be an appropriate timeline, do you think, Dustin, of trying to bring those entities together?
I suppose a few weeks.
Okay. Mr. Tufti, that's acceptable? Commissioner George?
Sure.
Okay. We'll charge you with that then. Just communicate if there's some issues with various entities, please do that. Again, this process is moving forward, but resolution of concerns that we have, I think it's the best thing we can do. Okay? Thank you. So, we have 2250 as a separated item. Mr. Shockley, your advice?
So, you can certainly move forward with directing the Special Assessment Commission to meet. The meetings regarding the change order for the dirt can go on. It's going to be at least 4 months before it comes back to the commission. So you have more than adequate time for the two processes to work concurrently.
Well, I'd like to move it forward to the Special Assessment Committee, so this process should continue this evening as far as I'm concerned. Commissioners, what's your pleasure?
I'll make the motion to move.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Is there a second? Commissioner Jurdovic, second. Been moved and seconded to move it forward. That is item number 2250 that was broke out from the rest of the items. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. Item number 11 is the arterial road special assessments. Commissioner George.
Yeah, so, Commissioner Jurdevig and I have been brainstorming, because obviously special assessments are probably one of the most heated issues in the entire city. I hate specials, but we are using specials, so I think the only thing we can do at this point, since we can't just flat out get rid of them immediately, although I would like to, that's not the case, but to try and make them as fair as possible. In talking with residents, a lot of people are fine with paying their fair share of infrastructure, but how to do this, you know, how to make it more fair. So we're bringing forward a proposal tonight to just, at this point, just try and make it more fair is the goal with this one. Certain neighborhoods end up paying higher specials than others. Charleswood, for an example, people in that neighborhood, they're paying for improvements on Cheyenne Street, 9th Street, 13th Avenue, the roads in front of their homes, versus the neighborhoods on either side, you know, wouldn't have to pay for both Cheyenne and 9th typically. So basically what this causes is certain parts of town pay higher assessments than others for no real additional benefit. So to try and, you know, with the goal of making things more fair and even, the motion tonight would be, let's see, our proposed motion is to ask city staff to work on defining a new plan or strategy to resolve how our major road projects are assessed to ensure fairness and strive to eliminate this issue to the best of our ability. So that is my first motion.
Discussions and questions from Commissioner George.
I don't know if you want to add anything, or...
I think you described it well. I think there's some, from an assessment perspective around arterial roadways, there's some advantaged and disadvantaged places to live in West Fargo. And that creates inequity. Charleswood versus if you're east or west of Charleswood, but hopefully you live there for 30 years, you're going to pay more for really the same benefit.
Right, so a matrix of some sort could be drawn up where basically if you live here, you're going to pay for this north-south road, this east-west road, and the roads in front of your house, essentially, is the goal.
And we already do it in certain roads because we use 7th Street as, or 7th Avenue typically as a divider between whether you're being assessed for Main Avenue or whether you're being assessed for 13th Avenue. So if we just be figuring that out and, you know, figuring out where those lines are drawn.
They're not actually paying higher assessments. They're getting hit with more special assessment projects versus paying a higher rate of special assessment. So that's not a correct
You know, on
statement.
an individual assessment, it's not necessarily higher, but we're getting more of them over a long period of time, and therefore over 30 years, they are being assessed for quite a bit more.
I understand that, but I just want to make sure that's clear. They're not paying a higher assessment where they live. They're getting hit with more projects.
Yes.
A clarification on your motion. Who would be on this committee to review this?
Oh.
Have you had discussions on that?
I guess I'm not sure it's a committee. I think it's asking city staff to look into this and come back with a recommendation.
Agreed.
Mr. Shockley.
Thank you, Mr. Commission President. So by Century Code, the city of West Fargo is required to have a policy for special assessments. Currently have a policy, so we could certainly take back the discussion regarding changing the limits from a mile down to half a mile and put that in the, take a look at how that would impact the policy and bring that back to the commission.
There's somebody's hand up in the public.
We don't even have a second yet.
That's true.
I don't have. Commissioner Jurdevig seconds. Been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? It's not the intent for the public to respond to this particular element. We can take your advice and suggestions when we're in the non-agenda items, but this is not debatable with the general public. That's all right. So, we have a motion on the floor. Any further discussion? Again, to clarify what Mr. Shockley said, we have a special assessment policy which is required by the North Dakota Century Code. So, with all due respect to staff and or to Commissioner George and Commissioner Jurdevig, that's where we have to start with the beginning to know what the benchmark is, so, where we're at and how we're operating. So, again, is there any further discussion?
This is just to review the policy and make suggestions for
Directing staff to review, yes. We'll proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Next order of business is item number 12, a special assessment committee review request. Commissioner George.
All right, once again, Commissioner Jurdevig and I, were brainstorming. We'd also spoken with members of the special assessment, committee. I'll just read a few notes I have here. With specials, we need to do more work up front. I think everybody would agree on that, especially after tonight. Right now, we approve a project, it gets completed, then the assessments go to the special assessment committee to divide them out. And for many people, they feel like they didn't have enough opportunity to protest at the beginning, or so at this point of the project, let's see. Okay, at this point, obviously, like what we were saying, it has to get paid. Everybody's get paid. So what can we do at the beginning? We need to get the information out up front where people have a pretty good idea of their costs prior to a project getting completed. A member of the Special Assessment Committee has also brought this idea forward, where Special Assessment Committee would have an upfront meeting before the project is started. This would provide additional public input and visibility and potentially give them the opportunity to have input to the assessment before district before it is set. So again, hopefully solving some of the issues that we're having tonight is kind of the goal of this. So the motion here would be to ask staff to meet with Special Assessment Committee members, gain their feedback in relation to this idea, and bring back to the Commission any recommended changes. So basically bringing it to the Special Assessment Committee at the beginning.
Okay, thank you. Questions from Commissioner George?
And I don't know if Commissioner Jurdevig has anything to add, or...
Mrs. Fisk.
President Dardis and Commissioners, I just want to give you a heads up. I've already spoke with Bernie about President Dardis, about this earlier. Staff has been working on fine-tuning or going through and cleaning up our special assessment procedures and policy to bring back forward to Commission, which includes a lot more outreach and so on and so forth that we've already implemented. But as part of that, one of the things that we were considering putting in there, I've got it in there now, but it's got to be reviewed by all of you, is to have the Special Assessment Committee meet, but it wouldn't be until after the bids were accepted by the City Commission, because up until that point, we don't even put anything out there as pending, and we don't know if the project's even going to go through. So, I mean, you could have the Special Assessment Committee meet 2-3 times before this for no reason. Because if you drop a project, then all the work is for nothing. And keep in mind, there is costs associated with bringing in more consultants and so on and so forth, which will go on the project, which I am more than happy to work with staff and review what can be done and what the benefits would be and what the pros and cons. But it's just something to keep in mind is at some, that's where the engineer and sets the parameters of the district. You as a commission are required to look at it and see if you're comfortable with that and approve it. That's how it's handled. Right now, it's a commission decision. So, but we will look into it if you so choose.
Thank you.
I think the ask is really to talk with our special assessment committee, and if there's some input there to influence that. I think just generally speaking, getting more involvement on the front end of a project will save us a lot of heartache on the back end of the project. We've seen it numerous times.
So would this be part of the previous motion we just made to look at our policy?
Commissioner Olson, thank you, Mr. Commission President. So the policy is slightly different. This is a procedural issue. I would envision that we would go back and look to see if, under the Century Code, the engineer recommends the size and form of the improvement district to the Commission. We could certainly adapt the procedural policies that the engineer would meet with the Special Assessment Commission to get their input regarding the size and form of the improvement district, and that would come as part of the report back to the Commission on the size and form of the improvement district. As the City Administrator said, it's ultimately the Commission's decision by the Century Code for the size of the district. So we can certainly take a look at that. And I just want to note, as the rest of the staff, that does, just so everybody's clear and transparent, those do add additional costs and timing to the district, and you may get some pushback from developers because you're adding in additional steps where developers are used to come in the door or start the district right away, and we're off and running. It's going to add another procedural step to it, just for transparency.
For me, I'm okay with spending more money at the beginning to get it right. Some situations we've had recently that I liked is, up in the industrial park, there was a road project, and those businesses knew ahead of time what it was going to be, what it was going to cost, you know, and they were okay with that, and that made me feel comfortable voting for it. And I feel like we're not quite there with the residential neighborhoods, and I know obviously you can't go to every single homeowner the same easily as you can the businesses, but just getting that information out there better, being more on top of it, more transparent, more at the beginning. So I'd rather spend the money up front.
And to be clear, your motion, if I understand it, is for city staff to research this and basically come back with a recommendation, so.
Yes.
Thank you. Been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Item number 13, the annexation of property south of Main Avenue. Commissioner Jurdevig.
This might be slightly less procedural and more political, but, in looking at how assessments get handed out, and the city cannot assess a property that is not within the city limits. And we recently, completed the annexation of 4 properties on the south side of town, that those properties largely had missed out on assessments for the last 20 years because they weren't in the city. Even though they use city streets and, you know, are absolutely surrounded by the city of West Fargo. There is one extremely large property, that people assume is in the city of West Fargo. Matter of fact, when you come off interstate, the sign for welcome to West Fargo is actually not in West Fargo. Oddly enough, because it sits on the fairground property. The 400 or some odd acres that make up the fairgrounds in Ansville in the county office. If you go back and look at the 2000, I believe it was 7, when Main Avenue was reconstructed, well over, they have almost a mile of roadway on Main Avenue that West Fargo residents paid for. The fairgrounds should have been on that from an assessment perspective. Technically speaking, I think this should be practically illegal, but our West Side residents, we've been forcing them for decades to subsidize the fairgrounds through a tax. Because if they were in the city of West Fargo, they absolutely wouldn't be paying a large portion of those assessments. And instead, because they're not in the city of West Fargo, we divided up and just added on to everyone else's assessment. So if you go back to that 2007 one, when I had looked through the math, this was a year or two ago, I mean, it's pretty easy to assume that those assessments that were handed out were 30, probably quite a bit more than that, but at least 30% more than they otherwise would have been. So, 2017? 17. Wow, I
missed a
a
decade.
lot longer ago than that. So I would, ask, and it's not to make a decision tonight to annex those properties, but because there's a lot of complication, I think, in annexing a fairground, when we look at city ordinances. You know, my ask tonight would be that we would move forward with directing city staff to do the research and start conversations with those entities and figure out a plan, so that we can annex, those properties and avoid future assessments that are wildly, unfair to the businesses on Main Avenue that in some cases pay assessments in tens of thousands of dollars more than they would have if the fairgrounds had been in.
Questions for Mr. Jurdevig? Questions for Mr. Jurdevig? Comments, commissioners? Staff, have any guidance on, annexation process or anything like that? Of how this might start? Mr. Shockley.
I can give you an overview of the procedure for annexing property. Fairground property isn't any different than any other property that you would be annexing. In North Dakota, there's two ways to annex property. The first is by ordinance. It's usually by petition of the landowner. They submit a petition requesting annexation, and it has to be 3/4 of the property that is owned, that the owner signed the petition. And then you have a first and second reading. It's very straightforward. We file an annexation plat with the county. The second process for annexation in North Dakota is annexation by resolution. The city commission passes a resolution annexing the property. The resolution identifies the property, and then notices are sent to the property owners. There's a 30-day period after the notice is published and they receive it that they can file their objections. If more than 1/4 of the property protests, then it will go to an administrative law judge. That is what happened with the properties that were south of I-94, and the administrative law judge ultimately will make a decision. Governor will appoint mediation first before it goes to the administrative law judge. If there isn't any protest, then the annexation is effective after the 30 days. So it's a pretty straightforward process. Previously, when we had been working with, the city of West Fargo had been working with the West Fargo Fairgrounds, there was some development of potential agreements to deal with some of the issues regarding how you assess that property and development, because the fairgrounds is not a large revenue producer given their operations. And so one of the concerns they expressed was an ability to pay any special assessments or taxes. It's very difficult to pass that off to fair activities or, race car driving or concerts. They're just not a high profit margin. So, happy to answer any questions that you might have, but that's just a general overview of the procedure.
Could you address, like, building codes? Now, obviously, if we annex, any improvements that they'd want to make would all just about have to be conditional use permits, because a lot of the buildings in Bonanzaville wouldn't be a code. We also have ordinances with regard to animals within the city limits, and, so...
There's a lot of complexity, and that's
there's...
why the motion would be
Okay.
to,
Okay.
research all of that.
And my point is that we need to look at every avenue, on this as we move forward. Mrs. Fisk.
President Dardis and Commissioners, first of all, I apologize, President Dardis, I was going to get you that draft of what we had been working on. We do have some preliminary work done that deals with ordinances that could affect the fairgrounds, and it was meant so that we wouldn't put them out of business, but we would allow them to continue to do what they do. And so we do have some of that work done, so as staff, we'll be able to continue to work through that and bring something back to you along with the other two items.
Thank you, Mrs. Fisk. Commissioner?
And I'll just add in, obviously, the goal here is to not, create, insurmountable hardship, to these organizations. But I also think it's really important when we say that to also realize that we have hundreds and hundreds of residents and businesses in the west side, west of the Cheyenne River, that also might be dealing with any number of personal hardships or business hardships that we are technically taxing more than we should be for assessments. And so I don't want to paint a picture that we're overly concerned about one entity and putting that burden on everyone else, assuming that there's not hardships there as well.
Thank you, Commissioner. Where are we at? Do we have a motion? We have a
I believe
second.
I made a motion.
I'll second the motion.
Mr. Olson seconds. Is there any further discussion? Motion on the table is to direct staff to review the possibility of the annexation of the fairgrounds, Bonanzaville, the campgrounds, and the Cass County offices. All approximately 400 acres. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Item number 14, City Administrator's Report. Mrs. Fisk.
Good evening, Commission President and Commissioners. I will make this as brief as possible. I only have 3 items. First of all, I wanted to remind you all that tomorrow, 2 to 3:30, there will be a virtual legislative conversation, and it'll be Cass County Commissioners, staff, Fargo Commissioners, staff, and West Fargo Commissioners, hopefully who can make it, and staff. This is to assist with getting information to them as it's time for crossover, and Bernie understands all that way more than I do, but at any rate, it's a virtual meeting, and so if you need us to resend you the links to get in, Robert Wilson from the county has been kind enough to work on setting everything up, and so we can get everything resent, but I know he sent something out either today or last week. So just let me know if you need that.
There's a new update today.
Oh, perfect. The second thing I want to talk to you about is just give you an update about the Love Your Local gift card program. As of today, there's 108 businesses enrolled. 71 of those businesses have redeemed cards. There's been almost $51,000 redeemed. And of that, the redemptions are 2,568 transactions using those cards. And so, seems to be a success, and I believe Melissa could share with you, if you want to talk correspondence, some of the people that have written in and really do appreciate the gesture, and there was one that was just so adorable. This older couple had been staying in for COVID, and they always used to go out twice a week and eat. And she said they were going to take that card now that they had their vaccines and go out and have a nice supper together. And so she sent a nice thank you, and I think that's the kind of thing we've got to remember, and that was a very, very good gesture on the Commission's part, so thank you.
Could you repeat the dollar amount, please?
The number that's been redeemed?
Yeah.
51,000.
Okay, thank you.
If you want the exact number, it's $50,962.76.
Ballpark's good for me.
Okay. So Melissa's really good about keeping us up to date on how that's going, and both her staff and Economic Development with Lauren, they've done an amazing job reaching out and getting things done. So I'm really very, very happy about that. Last but not least, I want to have Tim Solberg come up here. Tim Solberg has been hired as our first Assistant Administrator for the City of West Fargo. He will lead the different sectors of engineering, economic development, public works, and my brain just died, and planning. So we're very excited to have Tim on board. It was really interesting, as those of you that were involved, we're very fortunate in West Fargo, I will say that. So here he is.
Thank you, Mr. President, Commissioners. I'm super excited. Couldn't be more honored to be working for this commission and working for Tina. She's been a tremendous leader. I hope to just build up planning, engineering, public works, and economic development. What you saw tonight with Dustin, tremendous, compassion for this city. That's something that each one of our department heads hold, and I just want to build them up more. So I hope to bring assistance and not overmanage, so that's my goal.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congrats.
Congratulations, Tim. Thank you. Correspondence, Tina, anything?
Nothing at this time.
Okay. Non-agenda items. Commissioners, do you have anything that you'd like to bring forward at this time? Non-agenda? Staff, do you have anything on non-agenda that you'd like to bring forward? Mr. Solberg.
Thank you, Commission President Dardis. I was informed in the hallway at the recess that there's a person here who would like to ask for a building permit at their own risk. I'd ask if you can hear them.
Okay, I believe this is the gentleman from Black Powder, if I'm not mistaken. Please come up and give us your name and address, please.
Hi, everybody.
Hello, sir.
Hi.
Quite the evening. My name is Kevin Brennan. 1984, Selby Avenue in St. Paul. Don't hold that against me. I'm a Bison, a graduate, and my student taught right around the corner at West Fargo High School. So I got that going for me, everybody. So President Dardis and Commissioners, and my partner Brad Schmitz is somewhere in a Zoom, I imagine. He's in the wings in case he wants to pipe in. We're the owners of Black Powder Fireworks, and if you recall, I'll do this quickly since it's been a long one. The Diversion Authority has bought us out on our old property and left us trying to find a new spot, and we have done that. So I'm here requesting an early building permit. All plans have been submitted and reviewed by the appropriate departments. However, the timing of our final plat approval is one of the details holding up our ability to be granted a permit. There's the plat in a nice cylinder right there. It's here, Tim. Congrats, by the way. I know it's not to be approved until the March meeting. I also want to mention, I know it requires the title opinion, which the staff was forwarded when we received it last week. We have a civil engineering consultant that has met with city departments. This was back in November, before we moved any clay, and built up the pad, and that has been done already. So now we're really, really itching to get this building process going. So we respectfully request this board to direct staff to release a construction permit, a building permit, or at least a footing and foundation permit so we can start the groundwork. Every day is important if we want to have any chance of opening mid-June, and mid-June is late for us to open anyways, but we have hope. So here I am, everybody. So it's great to see you all.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Brennan. Any questions for Mr. Brennan? This chair is getting hard.
Maybe I have a question. Tim.
Yeah.
Tim, you know the questions are going to come back to you anyway, so
Well, there's
please.
questions for both engineering and planning and building inspection, so this isn't something we often feel very comfortable with. There's a number of items that we have to address, and so permit at your own risk is almost the wrong term to use. It's permit, and we might tell you you don't get a permit after. So it's not really we're giving any permit. There's no permit to be given because we've not been given that opportunity to go through the things. It's almost like it's a request to overlook them starting before getting a permit is essentially what it comes down to.
How would we deal with any other contractor or any other individual in the city of West Fargo if that happened?
It's happened in the past a couple times, and we don't have a fine structure set up for starting work without a permit. Essentially, we punish them after the fact by either delaying or not issuing the permit, those types of things. We don't have a fine structure set up.
Are we considering one? Okay. Please, Mr. Scott.
Thank you, Commissioners. So recently, I became aware that, one, they did fill out there. They added, I don't know how many feet of fill, but they did that without having a floodplain development permit. So we've been coordinating that here now. I got on the phone with the representative from Southeast Gas to take a look at the flood model. Generally, before we issue a building permit, they would have a floodplain development permit in place. Some of the impacts that can happen, of course, is when you build in a floodplain, the water now is displaced and can go somewhere else, and that 1 inch that you've affected it could be that 1 inch that impacts the adjacent agricultural land or somebody's home or so on and so forth. So generally, we do our diligence and confirm those things prior to not only issuing the floodplain development permit, but of course, the building permit. I understand that, you know, we've all known about this for some time, but again, until recently, has there been any conversation to this particular level, at least at my doorstep? So, like I said, we hope to have some answers soon, but until those things are in place, I quite frankly would not feel comfortable issuing a building permit until I know what those impacts are. You issue a building permit tonight, and we run a model, and a week later, we find out that there is an inch to deal with somewhere. What is the recourse then? Do we go back and ask them to remove all that fill? Do we go back and ask them to take down their building? I would ask yourselves those questions before you grant an early permit tonight. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Commissioners?
What is the timeline to get more comfortable with it from the city's perspective? Like what are the steps realistically, you know, by our next meeting, are we going to have some of those things?
So I'm going to take this with me and review that. This is what we're waiting for to have on the March 15th agenda, so the final plat, so then we know they actually own the land to be able to work on. Dustin won't sign this plat until he's reviewed a grading plan, drainage plan, utility plan, making sure all those issues are taken care of. We also will review this to ensure that it's got the floodplain on it. When you're in a floodplain, you have to put that on your plat, so we'll review that. It's just a number of things that we do. This is why it's hard for Dustin to meet with other people when we gotta do all this stuff. It's a lot of work. It really is a lot of work, and that's the things we go through before a plat gets approved.
Thank you, Mr. Soberg. Mr. Brennan, quick question. Where are you at with Southeast Water? Have you met with Southeast Water? Have you submitted anything to them?
Southeast Water, Brad, you want, or, I don't know.
They review the plat, so they have reviewed the plat, and actually one of their comments was that it shouldn't have the floodplain on the plat.
Okay, so who does the drainage thing that you mentioned?
The drainage plan is reviewed by the city.
That's all, that's us?
So Commissioner President Dardis, gonna double back to Commissioner Jurdovic's question too on the timeline. So this morning I called a representative from Moore Engineering, who is the Southeast Castwater Resource District Engineering representative too, to just ask how quick could they take a look at the model. There's only really 3 entities locally that even have the current flood model to be able to do something with. He thinks that within the next couple of days, they could probably run a model and have some answers. Now, we're gonna pay for that. We're gonna, through our task, one of our task orders with Moore Engineering, we will pay them the, however many hours it takes, probably 2-3 hours. We're not talking thousands of dollars here, but, eventually, again, as we start talking policies, these are the kinds of things we should probably build into our permit. But since we don't have this in place, we don't often deal with floodplain development work. We just don't have it, and so in the essence of time, I had directed them to go ahead and do so, and we would pay for that 2 to 3 hours so that we could have a quick resolve for this particular developer. But again, until I have that number or those impacts in place, I wouldn't feel comfortable issuing an early permit.
Very good. Questions, additional questions, Commissioners?
So, if this doesn't get passed tonight, does it have to wait until the next meeting to get passed, or can we pass it on a condition?
Again, I think you'd be directing staff, sorry, Commissioner George, you'd be directing staff to not cite them in violation of not getting a building permit. There's no permit to issue. You can't have us overlook the fact that these things are missed. We're not gonna issue a permit. We're not gonna take any liability on none of that, because we can't overlook the things that we need to review. It's almost like overlooking, and John, I don't know if I'm catching the right thing here, but this is really what we're being asked of.
Mr. Shockley.
Mr. Commission President, the commission is being asked to allow somebody to proceed with construction at their own risk. It's not issuance of a building permit, it's proceed with the construction at your own risk, knowing that you still have to get a building permit.
So what's worst case scenario then if we say, okay, I mean, it's probably not gonna flood this year.
Well, the worst case scenario is that, the permit doesn't get issued and they have to tear down the building.
Then maybe that should be on them if they're okay with that scenario.
Mr. Schmitz is also online and has raised his hand to speak if you'd like to hear from him.
Would you restate that, please, Melissa? I couldn't understand you.
Mr. Schmitz with Black
Okay.
Powder Fireworks
Partner.
is also online.
Brendan's partner. Mr. Schmitz, you have the floor.
Well, thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Commissioners. I just want to pipe in and say that, we're new to this whole process of developing land. We really, obviously, you guys know we don't want to be in this position. A lot of this has been forced on us, and we're now at a position now where we've been kicked out of our building. We've looked at 3 different sites. We've actually found this site. We've worked with the commission. We worked with planning and zoning. We've worked with engineering. And we've done everything we've been asked to do, and it looks like there's potential that we won't even get open this year. Up until this point, we have not heard any problems. This floodplain issue, I just heard about that today. That may be on me. It may be on our engineer team. But it's just been incredibly frustrating, the red tape that has been presented in front of us that we certainly did not ask for, and to do everything that we've been asked to do. and cross every bridge, and now we're finally at the finish line, and we still have people telling us that it isn't going to happen, and still putting up roadblocks. And like I said, I understand some of that's our responsibility, but like I said, it's our first time doing this, so we're new to this, and we're just looking for these 2 weeks, because these 2 weeks are absolutely crucial for us to get open. And even if that means we're putting just footings down, just to give us that head start, it means the world to us. So I just plead our case one last time that the commission just will consider it.
The way I see it is, if it's not going to cost taxpayers anything, if it, all falls apart, and if they're willing to take that on, who cares, I guess.
We can't set a precedence here and allow people to go in and do things like this. We need to follow our ordinances, so, I would not be in favor of issuing a permit at this last moment like this. I would follow our staff's directions and not issue the permit tonight. So I don't know what the recommended action at this point is, to just not act on it and make sure staff has had their adequate time to review it and bring it forth to us in a future meeting. Because I think after all of that, then it's possible we could review it. Because if we deny it tonight, is that denied forever? Or is it just denied tonight and then he applies in the normal time frame and things like that?
All good questions. Mr. Shockley, please.
Mr. Commission President, Member Olson, so they're requesting you to take affirmative action tonight. If you take no action, then they just have to follow normal process. They're just requesting to be allowed to proceed at their own risk. So if you took no action, they would be subject to normal rules.
As far as setting precedents, so this is an unprecedented situation. They were being forced, they were forced from their current location because of the diversion, not because they wanted to move. So to me, this is a special situation.
Can you tell me why you moved from parcel A to parcel B to parcel 3? I understand the timeline or the need for expediency, but the meter didn't start running with the city of West Fargo when you were making the decisions on the parcels. When did you finalize the parcel that you've landed on?
It's been quite the process, because we're trying to establish which chunk of land we can get, which chunk of land we can do something on, and we were really set on trying to be on this side, the east side of the diversion, just for sake of ease for our clients, et cetera. So it's been, in Bradway Inn, it's been, I think we settled on it within the last, is it a couple months, Brad?
Well, so we started with, let's call it parcel A, and that was on the outside of the diversion.
Closer to the mic, buddy.
Can you guys hear me okay or no?
A little closer to the mic, please, Brad.
All right, I'm right by it, so if you guys can't hear me, I apologize.
Go ahead and try it again.
Okay, sounds good. Can you guys hear me or no?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, sounds good. Well, the reason why we had to settle on this parcel so late is because, if you guys remember, planning and zoning kicked two of them up to you, and one of them was denied, the preferred site. So we had to go back to the drawing board, which cost us another couple months. And then we had to renegotiate. We've had to talk to the DOT to get an approach put in, and it just, you know how these things are. You guys are well aware. Every time you make a change, it's 2 months down the road. So all of a sudden, we started back in October, maybe even September. I don't even remember when we came to the first few meetings. Well, all of a sudden, you miss a couple things, and a couple things don't go your way. Here you are. It's March, and we're behind the 8 ball. And I understand that's not your problem. And like I said, we're new to this. I hope to never do this again in my lifetime. But we're very much in a tough spot now.
Another situation here is, if we don't let them do this, they're going to miss their entire sales season, and that's also unusual. It's not a standard situation where a business could just open a couple of months later. They'll miss the entire season.
Is the current building going to be destroyed this year?
Yeah, we're actually out of it right now. We had to be out of it, the end of February. And we tried, negotiating, waiting longer, at least waiting for the next season, but something about demo contracts and them needing us out. So we were unable to stay where we were at. Yeah, you know what, and I'll just own it. We'll apologize on one level of not really knowing what we're doing. This is brand new. We're learning a lot. It's super painful. And to reiterate what Brad said, when we get so far and then we hit a curveball or we make a mistake or we didn't realize something or we learn about a flood impact study late, I mean, we're all of a sudden, right back. And so it's been really difficult. Reasons, no excuses, but it's been tough. So we're just looking to try to move some kind of a needle here. You know, we got a builder ready to go. One of the representatives here, they're obviously itching, but everyone knows we can't do anything without a permit. You know, so we realized it was a long shot coming in here. Felt it was worth asking.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Brennan.
I'd make a motion to approve it.
Mr. George moves to approve. Is there a second?
I'm torn on my thoughts on it. But I am pretty sympathetic to a business that if they don't get it open, get delayed an entire year. Are you fully aware of the consequences of starting that on your own risk if it doesn't get approved? Because you're not getting a building permit. I mean, at best, you're getting the city not penalizing you for not having one when you start the project.
So to be clear, we would do whatever we do in the next week or so, and knowing the risk could be very well that you say no to a permit in a couple weeks or whatever it may be, correct?
Mr. Scott?
Thank you. One
question.
Yep, just wanted to point out one last time, thank you, Commissioners. A lot of the fill was done. So they already did a significant portion. In fact, probably the most expensive portion has already been done at their own risk. You can take that into consideration too. I mean, so what they're looking for now is the actual structure. Now, again, I don't know how much, but like Tim said, you're not deciding whether or not to issue them an early permit. You're basically, if you were to approve what they are asking for, you're basically telling staff not to take any action upon them not having a permit, which, like I said, we've already been doing for the last several months. They've already worked, and we haven't penalized them yet, so they could go out there and continue to work. Again, I'm hopeful that within the next few days, we'll have an understanding about, again, the impacts to the floodplain. And once we have all the information, our normal process is staff can issue a permit so it wouldn't have to come back to the city commission to issue a permit. But I just want to let you know again that they've already done some of this work at their own risk, and I think they're asking to continue working at their own risk.
Did you say it wouldn't have to come back? I apologize. Can I ask something? Did you say it wouldn't come back to the city commission?
Well, generally, building permits are issued, at the discretion of the building administrator. All permits do come to the city commission for review and approval on a consent agenda, or on the item before the consent agenda. But again, it doesn't require, every building permit does not require a city commission review and approval, so.
One item Dustin said earlier, I'd like to just catch up to. The flood study that we're doing is a requirement of the floodplain development permit. They're in floodplain zone A, which requires a flood study. However, the flood study's already been done in the Western Cass Flood Insurance Study that's preliminary right now. And in that, they need to do an update to the model. So we would require that of their permit anyway. So the charges that Dustin referred to, that we're getting consultation from More Engineering, that's that same one you'll recall, Mayor, that we talked to the county about. We're going to pass that fee on to them in their floodplain development permit that they didn't get. So we're going to come back and they're going to pay for that, not us, just so you know.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
We have a motion on the floor to allow them to proceed without penalty from engineering or planning and zoning. Is there any further discussion?
We don't have a total second yet.
I'll second it.
Commissioner Jurdevig anguished over it, but he gave us a second. So we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion fails due to a tie. Are there anybody else, I've asked for staff and I've asked the commission for non-agenda items. Is there anyone from the public here this evening that would like to speak to a non-agenda item? Is that Mr. Jensen?
Yes, it is.
Yes, sir. Please, join us.
Sitting there too long. A couple of comments I'd like to make. One is to Commissioner George regarding this commission on special assessments. And I understand you want your staff to work on it, but I think it'd be wise to get some outside views on it. Because sometimes internally you get caught by boundaries. And it'd be wise, I think, to look at some other issues and how to address it that may be appropriate, may not, I don't know. But until you try, you'll never know. And so I would ask that when they do that, that there's some outside people brought in from the public that may have some ideas worthy of you to consider. The second issue is to Mr. Scott regarding, all these numbers floating around on these jobs and assessments and everything else. Whenever we built the building, I had my bid numbers. Then you pay the contractor on various stages when they complete certain things. They submit their bid that says, well, we'll move X number of yards of dirt. After that, you pay me X. And we should have a spreadsheet out there that says, here's the bid, here's the payments that have been made so far, and when you get to the end, you should have a variance. I'm short, I'm long. It's something that someone can look at the detail. Because, Mr. Scott says, well, someone gives me the numbers. Well, who's that someone that gives you the numbers? And I think there should be a sheet out there that the public can look at, see where the variances are at, where short or long, and any change orders that come in. And I think the commission has to be strong on backing up change orders to make sure that they're sufficient and adequate. Because when we built buildings, we just said, hey, you bid it at this price. You're stuck with it. We aren't going to change orders. Or they change orders and we said, yes, we agree to it and we'll pay them. But I think that's some of the practices that maybe would be wise within the city to consider looking at. It gets you that transparency you're after with everyone looking at the stuff. I got lost in the numbers back here when Elton was talking. I said, well, I thought this was just on 32nd to 40th Avenue. Well, then it turns out it was from the underpass and the lift station, and all that was in this whole thing. Well, to the unknown eye, you lost me. And I think it would be wise if that stuff was spelled out in some form, spreadsheet that says, here's the bid prices, here's the variance, and so forth. So when you got to the end, and it goes to the SAC committee, they know exactly how they got to the dollars. And you also know exactly if there's a challenge, why you want to challenge it. Just recommendations.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson.
From an old part.
I do have a question for you, sir.
Yes.
Did you participate in the special assessment forms that we held for the public?
Yes, I did.
Okay, that was the chances at that time, and we took
Yep,
those in.
but now when I start talking here about a commission, and it's city people, nothing against the city people, but sometimes we get in that enclave, and we fail to see what's on the other side as opportunities. Whether it be the city, multiple cities, the county, I think there's some other ideas that could be bounced about, that at least should be considered, that might lighten the load on the individuals who are paying the bill at the end. Just like the gentleman on the bond, he gave you a nice Moody rating, And I've been through that process, and I know exactly how they look at stuff. My background on is much larger numbers, and all the stuff you have to put together for those people to make a bid on it. It's time-consuming in detail, but it's also a good practice to say where you're at and where you're going.
I like your ideas. I think they're really good.
Yeah, so, my question, that's my comment, thanks.
Commission President Dardis?
Did I give you my name?
Mr. Bob Jensen, could you tell us your address, Bob?
4406 South River States Way.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Mrs. Fisk?
Yes, I just wanted to clarify that every time we do a construction or project payment request, all of those details and percentages and numbers are all on there. So every time there's a bill listing, those are available. We keep those, we have them at engineering where they're available to send out, and we do track that. That is something that we track very closely, is where are we at, and Dustin's staff watches that very closely because that's part of what they do. It's just they've got so many projects going on that they can't tell you exactly where. They've looked at them and they've quantified them and said, okay, this is okay and this is okay, but he can't just spit out numbers when you're doing 20 projects, and each project probably has 150, 200 line items. But we do have those.
But it should be out there for the public to view. For those interested citizens that want to keep track, and 20 projects is nothing. You know, you're paying, it's a matter of putting a line item in the computer that automatically carries it across. You can see where you're at. It's, you know, modern technology allows you to track this stuff.
Yep, and we do track it, we just don't put bills.
Yeah, you track it, but how do I see it? That information should be available out on the city website if I want to follow a certain project that maybe it's in my area, and I'm going to have to pay the bill for it. And if I can understand how those numbers come together, I'm much better educated, understand the transparency, and much better educated in how to question. And a lot of times, maybe the questions are out in left field, if I would have had that information as we proceeded down through it.
Okay, staff can take a look at that as well, and how to see what's appropriate to put out there, and we'll work and bring that back as well.
What's appropriate not to put out there?
Well, what I mean is, these are pay requests that we get from our engineering firm, and they are appropriate to put out there, but not having, I want to make sure that everything is there that would answer as many questions as possible.
But most of the pay requests are going to come from the contractor.
Correct.
Are they not? Yeah.
Yep.
All right.
Again, thank you, Mr. Jensen. Is there anyone else that would like to speak to any item, a non-agenda item? If not, that concludes this evening's business. Mr. Jurdovic.
To adjourn.
Oh, okay.
I'm not sure how to close a meeting without Simmons being
Right.
here.
Yeah,
But I'll make the motion.
We stand adjourned, comedians. I'm smiling at you.